categorically prohibited. And they implied basically that we bought our accounts and we were buying interactions, which we weren't doing. We never bought any account. We didn't buy interactions. We had a few accounts with a few hundred followers from past businesses, but they didn't manipulate anything or interact with each other in any way. So we hired a lawyer, and it wasn't to sue them for banning us, but it was to sue Twitter for defamation because they put out this statement. The press picked it up. Fox News did a few stories as well as other outlets, and they were false based on Twitter's statement. And as our attorneys began communicating with Twitter's legal department, Twitter refused to provide us any information about why we were banned, about the reasons, about what they had to ban us, unless we signed a non-disclosure agreement. And we're kind of stuck between possibly spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to sue Twitter in a defamation suit, or signing this NDA and kind of figuring out what they had on us and why they did what they did. We opted to sign the NDA. And until this week, we've remained silent about it. I assume that Elon's not going to try and sue me for putting this information out there, but basically, Twitter made us sign this because they realized that their reasoning for the ban was ridiculous, I believe at least, and they didn't want us to talk to the press about it at the time. And basically, Twitter revealed to us after the signing of the NDA that they had thought that we purchased both of our accounts. We laughed at this because we obviously knew that wasn't the case. We then forwarded them emails from, I think it was 2009 or 2010, where we actually created these accounts that they were saying we bought. So we had these emails of us creating the account. We forwarded to them. We proved to them that we actually didn't buy the accounts. Twitter realized that they screwed up, and we have an email. They asked us something to the effect of, what do you want us to do to make things right? And we told them that we want them to issue a statement to the media saying that they were incorrect and they have no evidence that we ever bought our accounts or any interactions of any kind. And we asked them to reinstate our accounts. After maybe 2 or 3 days, Twitter got back to our attorney and they refused. They said that we were limited purpose public figures and that we would have to show them that they issued this statement with malice in any lawsuit. And they challenged us to sue them. We never did sue them.
And that's, hold on, that's all in, quickly, Brian, that's all in writing. They said this, like, they admitted to falsely banning you in writing and said, like, hey, you can't do anything about it?
They didn't admit to falsely banning us. We showed them the emails that proved that we didn't buy our accounts. And they asked us then what they could do to make things right. And we told them that we wanted the accounts back, and we wanted them to put out a statement to the media to the effects that they got it wrong. We didn't buy our accounts or any interactions. And that's when they refused.
And then you told me as well, when you first told me the story, you told me about what your assumptions were on why they banned you. And they wanted to make an example of you to try to balance it out because they were mainly banning people from the right. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any evidence of it, so it's just our personal feelings. Because I mean, we had our accounts for years. We weren't doing anything different than we were for the years prior, and we actually had emails with Kate. I forget her name. It was Katie something. It was somebody that worked for Twitter in the legal department, and we specifically asked her like 3 weeks prior if we were doing anything wrong because we noticed that we were being shadow banned. And she said, no, there's nothing wrong with your account. There's nothing you're doing wrong. And then Twitter, Dorsey goes to the White House, meets with Trump. I think it was, I don't know how many days, but it was within days. That's when the ban took place. I think that Twitter felt pressure by the Trump administration to kind of equalize things. I can't prove that. I don't know if that's a fact. That's the only thing I can go on based on the fact that we were suddenly banned, and I agree. I think right-wing users were banned way more than left-wing users were banned. But I feel they needed to make an example and show that they were more even-handed. Who knows if that's true or not? That's just what I feel in my gut.
And by the way, I've got a question for Tara and Ian. I was going through, trying to see how the media reacted to all this, and that's why I made a tweet a few hours ago. Kind of surprised by both media on both sides of the aisle that wasn't covering. They were calling it a nothing burger. I think Fox News also called it a nothing burger. So, what's your take? Is it just, why is the media against the story so much? Like, why is because it's a pretty sexy story. It will get them clicks. So I even asked a question in the tweet, like, what am I missing? And I'm genuinely curious. Why do you think the story is not gaining traction? Because at
Well,
least to
because
me,
they're
it
threatened
sounds
by
pretty
it.
serious.
They're threatened by
Why?
it.
Why?
They're threatened
Why?
by they're threatened by Twitter, because Twitter is basically crowdsourcing journalism. It's allowing independent journalists to have a platform in a way that is not censored. I mean, previously, if you looked at what they were suppressing, what stories they were banning, obviously they banned the Hunter Biden laptop story, and they banned a few others. For instance, the COVID-19 lab leak story. I'm not even talking about vaccines here. I'm not even going to get into that one because that's a whole different can of worms. But with the Zero Hedge, which is an independent journalist website, reported that the virus came from a lab in China, and they suppressed that for a few months. Right? You were not allowed to talk about it. You're not even allowed to talk about it on YouTube. Even today, it gets you banned. Right? And there's a reason for that, because it embarrasses the establishment. They want a single narrative, and if they are not in control of that narrative, meaning when I say they, I'm talking about the media, the establishment media, the legacy media, outlets like CNN and NBC, New York Post, and New York Times and Washington Post, and so on. If they're not in control of it, they want to shut it down, right? And this is what they do. They have a singular agenda.
Well, and
Ian,
this would essentially, they would essentially
Tara.
be they would essentially be outing themselves. So they would essentially be telling on themselves because they were directly involved with suppressing and censoring this information and, writing it off originally as Russian, propaganda or whatever they were calling it. So, I mean, they would essentially be showing their cards by admitting that this was happening all along.
Absolutely. I mean, they are the ones who spread this idea that that the Hunter Biden laptop story was a product of Russian disinformation. 50 intelligence operatives, ex and former, came out and said that it's got the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign, and they all ran with it. And on Twitter, for instance, a lot of the mainstream establishment journalists said the same thing. They echoed that, and instead of walking it back and saying, "Okay, we were wrong about this. We need to maybe not trust these intelligence operatives so much." Instead of saying that, they doubled down on it, and they still are doubling down on it. They're trying to call this whole release a nothing burger. They're still trying to pretend that the Hunter Biden laptop story has no legs. So they will alter narratives once in a while. They'll say that, oh, it was just Twitter was simply suppressing nude photographs of Hunter Biden. Wow, but why is this such a big deal, right? We saw that a few days ago when a Vox editor even said that, and they all ran with that story that it was just a way for Twitter to suppress a non-consensual nudity. And why are people making such a big deal out of it? Well, that's clearly not the story. The actual story of the Hunter Biden laptop thing was his dealings with foreign governments, particularly with Ukraine, right? Where he had he was being paid $83,000 a month to serve as a what do you call it, like a consultant on energy. What does this artist, this crackhead, sorry to call him a crackhead, but he used to be. What does he know about energy? Oh, it's because his dad was at the time the vice president of the United States. Now, we obviously can't prove that there was some quid pro quo going on there with Biden himself, but just do the math, right? Why is Hunter being appointed to these positions?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. Well, Hunter actually went on statement at one time when he was asked point blank by a reporter if this was a situation of quid pro quo, and he said probably. He said probably. Actually, to his credit, he said probably. I mean, look, for the legacy media to be insisting that this is a nothing burger, in my opinion, is absolutely absurd. What we are witnessing is one of the greatest violations of industry power in the history of big tech. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So the reason why I think they are painting it as a nothing burger is a twofold thing, which you kind of went over beautifully. Number one, it's an embarrassment for them at this point. Number two, it poses a direct threat to their business structure. The rise of citizen journalism on Twitter under Elon's Twitter is evolving at such a rapid pace right now. that they are kind of feeling the rug swept out from under them.
Yeah, but so the other side of it. So I do think it's more leaning towards a nothing burger than being some kind of bombshell.
How do you figure? Be specific.
No,
Be
that's
specific.
No,
Why is it that
will.
the media? I want to ask you this question: why is it that the media is so hard against Elon Musk right now and the Twitter files, trying to shut it down? When we have like clear evidence that SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, made off with a bunch of money and lost a lot of billions of dollars of people's home savings and stuff that they
against his own TOS, mind you.
And they're giving him essentially a free pass, right? They're doing interviews with him, making him seem like a good guy. Oh, he was just a good guy, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was just trying to do the right thing. Like they're all running these fluff pieces on him. And if we look into their financials, it looks like they got a lot of money from this guy, right? So why is it that they're so intent on making him look like the good guy, whereas Elon Musk is the bad guy for releasing all of this information?
Yeah. Let me
and further on that, most of these media companies that you're talking about are very infiltrated by intelligence agents like MSNBC. It's all former CIA, former, so you have a narrative that they're trying to get across, and it's very political. Now, remember, I used to work for Democrats. I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. So I'm speaking to you as an independent. And I'm just telling you that the media has gotten very skewed and answers to a corporate overlord, as Ian and Tara had pointed out. And those think about it, 22 companies own all of the Western media. So that's not very many. So Twitter poses this big threat, right, Mario? Because it's the public square. And like my story that was so suppressed and banned almost. I mean, there was people calling, actual journalists telling them not to run stories on me, people in the Biden campaign. And what they lose if they don't listen is they lose access and sometimes money. So this is really exposing a lot of crime. And also what Ian said is absolutely accurate. They're calling it a nothing burger because it's an everything burger. And
so
thank that. I want to hear Crassus's take. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So the reason I see it as more of a nothing burger is because I don't see anything new in the files that he released. We already knew that Twitter was censoring the New York Post story. They had internal discussions for days about the censorship of that.
Wait, how did we know that?
We
It was already in the
suspected. We
media.
didn't know it. We suspected it. Right? That's
Yeah, we were told we were called
smoking
conspiracy.
gun.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We were referred to as conspiracy theorists for even
That's right.
thinking that. So we didn't know that until as of the files being released. So
Yeah,
that's not true.
No,
And we also didn't know about
we
also didn't know about James Baker, the former FBI general counsel who was let go today. So those are two things that we didn't know about. So to say it's a nothing burger and there's nothing new, that's what the media, that's exactly what the media is trying to frame it as, and saying, oh, it's just the same old Hunter Biden laptop stuff. And that is the biggest issue of all, is it actually has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the effort that they went to, or the lengths that they went to, the effort that they put in to suppress this information and ensure that no one was allowed to talk about it.
Okay, can I just continue what I was saying?
Go right. I'm still thinking of what Tard said.
No, hold on. Go ahead, Brian.
Who's
Go ahead.
talking?
Yeah, Brian. It's Brian. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so actually I don't know when it was, but Jack Dorsey came out before this was released, and he said that they screwed up Twitter's internal debate over how they were going to censor the New York Post story. They screwed that up, and they were in a hurry. They were in a rush. Who's the guy that Elon fired maybe like 2 weeks ago, who was head of security? He said the same thing a couple of days ago. We knew that they were obviously censoring the New York Post article. We know that. We've known that for a year plus. Everybody's known that Twitter censored the New York Post story, right? We all know that.
The media certainly didn't cover it the way that we do. I mean, like you and I might have known about it. Sure. I mean, we might have like suspected a few things.
Censored. Twitter.
No, but we all knew that we were being spied upon before Snowden, but Snowden
Twitter
came
said
along.
that came out and said they censored it when it happened, actually.
Yeah, but what you're missing though, what you're missing in all of this is that we had federal government collusion. We have proof in the
We
leaks
haven't. Who
that the
colluded?
feds came out and actually unilaterally went to Twitter, a private company outside of their jurisdiction, and colluded
Who
a
did
federal
that?
apparatus that was staffed with several contacts within that the Biden administration had contacts within.
That wasn't in the
That
files.
fed.
Show me where in the files it
No,
shows that.
that was in the after
It was
drop.
the
Jack
first
Posobiec
release.
actually leaked that.
It was literally the first release. Is that we received a bunch of requests from the Biden campaign to do
But
X,
that's
Y,
not the
and Z,
federal
and here are a
government.
bunch of things.
That's not the federal government. That's a private entity that requested mostly nude
And
photos.
now
No.
Now
Not
they
just the
work in
Biden.
government.
Yeah, and not just the Biden campaign as well, but you also had the intel community as well. Who,
Where
what
did
I'm
it say
trying to
that?
say, they
And
heard
the
remember
DNC.
that was also
right?
another
And
part
these
of.
guys are
Hey,
government. They
President, you might
represent
want to go reread it.
politicians.
You might want to go reread the leaks as well as some of the extra information that came out, and that's what makes this whole deal with
I
Jim
have it.
Baker
That's the
so
whole thing.
important. That's what makes this so
Just read
important
it.
because a lot of the
Just
information that
read
we're getting also was suppressed and vetted heavily. But once again, the issue is that the intelligence community went out and colluded with a private tech firm to unilaterally against their own TOS. They had no rationale, no TOS reason. A lot of the people were freaking out behind the scenes because they knew what they were doing did not have a basis within the TOS to censor the story. So that's
send me a
done
link
on
right
behalf of the
now to
Biden
where
administration.
send me a link right now to where it says that in the files that the intel community was colluding with Twitter or forcing Twitter in any way to censor anything.
Hey, can you read between the lines, my guy? You might want to learn how to do that.
There is no between the lines. It's just what they posted out.
Actually, that's a different story. There is actual evidence that FBI agent named Elvis Chan was colluding with Twitter by requesting certain takedowns. That is in a completely different release. It's not a part of this one, but if you Google his name, Elvis Chan, Twitter, you'll find a bunch of news articles talking about this exact situation. So
I'm
this
not
is a
aware
very
of that,
multi-pronged thing, right? This is not a simple
but
Twitter
we're
files is
talking
all of it,
about
right?
we're talking about why the Twitter files were a nothing burger, and I'm just saying that it didn't provide anything of substance to say, hey, something illegal happened. There was no violation of a constitution.
Okay. The only thing of substance,
if I'm wrong,
my man, I understand, but the only thing of substance that we're trying to get out to you is the fact that not only was it just dick pics, crack binges, as well as a lot of illegalities by Hunter Biden, but it's also the fact that Joe Biden was cognizant while on campaign that his son was on the board of Burisma Holdings. And not only that, he was profiteering off of that. And that's a huge conflict of interest when you see that we're constantly shoveling money to Ukraine as he's got the presidency, yet he lied multiple times on the campaign trail saying he had no dealing of that, as well as the collusion within the FBI and intelligence community and Twitter.
Do not say any of that.
That's in the laptop. That's in the laptop leak.
But not the Twitter files. I'm not talking
the Twitter
about
files are about the laptop. Okay, if you're going to be obtuse about this, then please understand Twitter files about the laptop. Laptop has huge political ramifications. So if they suppress a story that had huge political ramifications for the person who is in office now, in order to get him over the finish line, that's interfering in the election, because that information should be democratically available to all of us. That should be available to all of us so that we can make an informed decision. So it's all about interfering in the election. If you remember what Elon Musk said, right?
Interfering in the election by asking Twitter if they could remove images of the nude son of the president. What else? There is nothing in Twitter files.
You're being obtuse on purpose.
You're obfuscating the point, NFT. Like this is the same thing that happened yesterday. So yesterday, I just made a joke tweet because the White House came out and said that what's happening on Twitter is not healthy, and I just made a little joke and I was like, "Oh, it was what you guys were doing healthy," and somebody replied in the thread. Not one person, many people replied and said, "Oh, well, it was just dick pics, or it was just the Hunter Biden story. We already knew about it." Making this political is going to obfuscate the point and nobody's going to understand it. It's not about what it was. The premise here is not about what was suppressed. The idea is that government entities being involved at this level. Like before, I don't want to say we've never known about this, because people are like, oh, just like somebody said earlier, we knew about the government was spying on us before Snowden said it, right? So public has perception of these things. But before the last 2 years, free speech wasn't at the top list of the most hotly debated issues in this country, because people had a pretty good understanding. Hey, you can't incite violence. Okay, on private platforms, they have the right to regulate free speech. But this is one of the few times that we've seen as a public that the government is interested in micro-regulating expressions of speech. That is an issue.
That wasn't the government.
It's not an issue because, hold on, let me finish. And if you go. My point is, it's not an issue because of what was deleted or what was suppressed, or even if it was forced or not forced. Coercion is the other thing that's used to obfuscate this argument. People are like, oh, if there's no proof that they were forced. That doesn't matter. If you have a compliant party on the other end, you don't need to force them, right? It's still collusion. Collusion doesn't need coercion. So this idea that we don't have evidence that anybody was forced to do anything, that's not the point. The point is the issue that the government is now involved in regulating micro expressions of speech that are not inciting violence or are not a direct danger to anybody's life. And it's not about like, oh, like the clapback is not like, oh, you want to see his dick pics? Like, no, that's not the point here. The point is that it could have been anything. But the idea that the government is involved in that, the White House is directly involved in that, is an issue. And before you go and say, well, it was pornographic material, do you support pornographic material on the platform? That's not my point either. Because if the White House had created,
it wasn't the White House.
Hold on, let me finish. If the White House had created an anti-pornographic task force and they had tried to take down every pornographic material on Twitter, I would have said okay. But they didn't. They wanted to just take down the pornographic material that was relevant to the son of the president. That is an issue.
It wasn't the White House.
In fact, they actually didn't mind the amount of child porn that was rampant on Twitter prior to Elon Musk taking over, which is another thing that the media refuses to bring up. They haven't even mentioned the fact that Elon Musk, first thing he did and said he would do and followed through with was working to rid Twitter of all of that. So obviously there's still some out there, but he has done more than Twitter did or anyone did in the past 10 years, in the past 1 month.
And it's not just that. I mean, it's still ongoing, right? A friend of mine, an associate, she works at Redux. It's a good magazine. They cover these issues. And she has only recently been in contact with a couple of people at Twitter who are now responsible for cracking down on CSE, right? Like child sexual exploitation material. This never happened before because, a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of us even in here, have tried to report these ongoing things that nobody cared about because Yoel Roth, for whatever reason, decided that it was not a priority for the company to crack down on. But now we're actually seeing action taking place. And despite the fact that they're actually taking action against this, what does the media run with? The media runs with this claim made, it's baseless, right? It's by some organization called the Center for Countering Online Hate. It's a British organization, it's an NGO. It's a very activist organization that claims that it's seen a rise in hate speech, and they can't really prove it. It's just them stating it, and that's what the media is running with. That's the narrative. Elon could literally cure cancer, and they'll say no, he's actually.
But Ian, you know what though, Ian?
And there's a broader picture to paint too, though. I think wording is extremely important. So they didn't.
Thank you. Words and facts.
They didn't just.
You guys
agree with you.
You guys are talking to 10,000 people right now.
They straight up said handle these. If you look at number 8 for Matt Taibbi, it said by 2020 requests were connected to actors to delete tweets, and you can see more to review from the Biden team. This is an email that was never supposed to get out. They never thought anyone would ever see this, and it showed 5 accounts, specific Twitter accounts, many of them talking about what happened with Hunter Biden, and those accounts were removed. They would not have been removed otherwise. It's very obvious based on the wording of handle these that they were removing these specifically because of request of the federal government. And so that's clear evidence right there. But what's even scarier—
It wasn't the federal government, though. It was a campaign. He wasn't in government.
But they were hiding it.
Hold on, Matt. These rebuttals that NFT keeps bringing up, like
Joe Biden
adding nuance.
Straight up say
you're
it.
adding nuance just to obfuscate
using that list.
Okay, hang on. I don't know if there's something going on with the space where you guys cannot hear each other, but when two people begin talking at the same time, you cannot hear either of you speaking at all. So please, please, please just let someone finish speaking, for the integrity of the space so that we can hear what they're saying and then the next person and make your comment.
Yes. All right. Well, let me go ahead and continue on. Then thank you, Tara. So what I was going to try to allude to is that the overall picture here is it's pretty obvious, first of all, that there was higher up than just the Biden team that was shown in this document. Of course, Joe Biden himself isn't going to use @JoeBiden@gmail.com or whatever. Like, they're not going to make it that obvious. But the point is, there's this broad picture. They would do these massive overreaches of power, and there would be no consequences over and over and over again. And you can see as it progressively gets worse. Take a little bit more power, take a little bit more power, take a little bit more power. And the overall trend here is that if Elon Musk had not purchased Twitter, if we had not seen him releasing these files, even if you don't think these specific files are that big, think about how far this could have gone. We could have gotten to the point where it was significantly worse than this had this not happened. So that's why the Twitter files are so important.
I'll let Fidget, I know you've been waiting for a while, bro. I'll let you jump in quickly, give us your take on this, and then we'll go with Alex.
Sure. You guys are in front of 10,000 people, and regardless of my political leanings, I think it's really important to, before we state our opinions as facts, be very clear about the words we're using, the facts we're alluding to, and assumptions being made, right? I think a huge part of that is, was the government asking Twitter to do any of this? And these are questions. Or was a political party trying to fight for their candidate asking a platform to do something? That doesn't make the asking okay. That doesn't make the actions of Twitter okay. Was Twitter a public or private company or a governmental entity? It was a public company with fiduciary duties to its shareholders. I'm not saying one thing's right or the other, but the conversation about is the fact that it leaned left and its audience and advertisers paid for that angle, a fiduciary, and you can put a thumbs down. I just want to talk through facts. There is a fiduciary duty to maximize profits, right? One might say that cutting down the fat, like Elon is doing now, would have been part of that, but advertising revenue is a piece to be talking about that. Obviously, governmental interference that impact elections is a terrible thing. It should not be happening. What's happening with Twitter is great, in my opinion, even though I tend to lean left, although I'm an independent libertarian. Sorry.
You mind if I chime in on this one?
Just let me finish. Just one last thing.
So I'm just going to say that. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. You make a good point that it's not the federal government, but it does show that there is a certain level of agenda or bias from the part of Twitter, right? I don't really have a problem with the Biden campaign reaching out to Twitter to get certain information about its candidates of press. That is their job. They want to get their guy in, and they don't like negative news being reported on him. That's understandable. However, it is not Twitter's duty or any media publication's duty to go along with it, to suppress and to acquiesce with their demands, right? Like,
but it is their choice. It is their full choice to, right? So let's make a difference between.
They're acting as an editor, right? They're acting in an editorial capacity.
Correct. So section 2,
presenting themselves as a neutral platform.
No.
So
but the makeup of a company has always affected that. The makeup of a company, like, there are plenty of companies that lean left, and there's plenty of companies that lean right. That's fine if everybody.
And they won't do it, right? They won't do what was asked of them because they have principles.
But it's not about principles.
No. Twitter doesn't have any, or at least it didn't. Yeah.
Ian, it's not even about integrity, because okay, sure, we can say that the actors at Twitter at that time didn't have integrity. I actually agree with that, but that's not even the point. The point is not whether there was an integrist or a bad actor there. The point is that if a company wants to lean left because the executive suite at that company and the majority of the employees of that company lean left, then the company's naturally going to lean left. The idea is the government being involved in the micro happenings of these occurrences. That's the issue. The government should not be involved to encourage, incite, motivate, ask, request, anything of this sort. It just should not be happening.
Or government agencies, and that would include the FBI.
All right, I'm gonna go just
Jump
because
in,
I've been
Alex. Go
waiting.
ahead. Yeah.
Grant, can I say something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there seems to be a lot of disregard for the fact that the guy that bought the company and paid $44 billion 3 nights ago said there was censorship. I mean, that's the word he used. That means information was suppressed from the public. And it's hard for me to believe in my lifetime where I see one crime, I'll find many. And I'm curious to see how that same censorship and suppression we will find out, relates to our involvement in Ukraine, the mandates that were pressed on us during the vaccine, the data that came from COVID, and on and on and on. And I think most of this group here, the audience, would agree, hopefully, that at least we know now that there was suppression of information to the American public.
I agree with that point, and I think that's why it's important that a lot of this comes out. And I just wanted to add a few thoughts because I think I have an angle on this that, based on the stage now, might be unique. So I worked, for background context, I worked in big tech for years. I ran some products at LinkedIn, which on some dimensions is actually larger than Twitter. It's larger from a revenue standpoint. I don't know if it is from a DAU standpoint at this point, but I think one of the most important things about these files is that Elon is actually giving some details into the inner workings of how large social media companies work, and I just wanted to quickly fire off just like some objective facts on how they work from someone who like actually got to do it every day when I was based in Silicon Valley working on these. So the first thing I just wanted to say is that these teams are very interconnected from a technical standpoint. So when Twitter censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, that had implications for both feed, which probably consists of like 3 or 4 separate teams at Twitter, as well as the messaging team, which is different, as well as the content moderation team, which is different. And so if you wanted to get anything done as fast as they did, you absolutely need exec level approval to move those things. So, as someone who hadn't like had a chance to see it on paper like all of us until recently, I kind of already knew that there had to have been execs involved. And so I think, regardless of what happens with Twitter, people should be aware that anytime things move this quickly in the future, that execs were absolutely involved in making those decisions. The second thing that I think is really important for people to understand about social media platforms, because Twitter will not be the last, and this will not be the last case of the government trying to put its finger on the scale, and these platforms have gotten so large. For context, Twitter in Q2 right now is seeing about 237 million daily active users, and Facebook sees 1.9 billion daily active users. So that is why it's so important that we protect the integrity. And I personally don't think there should be political bias within these exec teams. They need to be credibly neutral. And I can say from my experience at LinkedIn that they were not off of pure anecdotal evidence. In terms of the actual type of content that's out, Ian was talking about this briefly, and I think it's important that people are aware of this. There's 2 main types of content on social media platforms. The first is that you have organic content from users, and this tends to end up in the feeds, and this is dictated by feed algorithms, and there are teams that actually build these algorithms, but they are so complicated that a lot of the teams themselves do not understand the power of them and all the intricacies. And the second is the editorial content. So when you go to the Discover feed, right, or the Explore tab on Twitter, what you'll see is that there's sometimes these sections like trending, news, sports, entertainment. All of that content is curated by a team at Twitter. Those are Twitter insiders, and the product managers have the ability to dictate how the UI and the UX of these platforms look. So they can actually put their content above the organic content on the platform. And then just the last thing I wanted to say is when it comes to suspensions and bans, there are levels to this. Some of this is automated, but as the Twitter files showed, obviously what was happening is people were coming in. They were directly asking the executives to put their thumb on the scale of the organic content and take users off the platform. And I believe that's wrong. And I didn't see it happen, to the same degree. I think LinkedIn is fortunate to have to, or not have the same level of conversations because there's an inherent tightened up attitude to LinkedIn. But regardless if it's Twitter or another platform, people are going to want to talk about things like politics in the future. And it's important that the technical systems, as well as the actual social interactions that are pushing this content out and dictating how billions of people see content, that they are credibly neutral and fair.
I totally agree with everything you said there. And I, as somebody on the left, I agree that like 90% of Silicon Valley is probably progressives. And Twitter's staff at the time, they were probably 90% progressives. And I'm sure they leaned to the left and they viewed things more through the lens of somebody that was a progressive. With that said, putting actions into place based off of your political views as a private company, there's nothing illegal about it. You could argue it's immoral. Sure, maybe they were paying more attention to the requests from the Biden campaign than they were from the Trump White House. I'd venture to say they probably were. With that said, a private entity, the Biden campaign, contacting Twitter, a private company, to show them that there's content that's out there that they disagree with, or in most of the cases showed in the Twitter files was content that already broke Twitter's own terms of service. There's nothing illegal about that. It's not breaking somebody's First Amendment rights. It has to be a government entity forcing a private entity to block the speech, and that didn't happen. So that is why, going back, I said that the files, it didn't really resonate with a lot of the mainstream media as being something important, is because it didn't show any legalities. Sure, it showed some internal discussions, but it was stuff that we already probably figured was taking place.
Would you say, Brian, would you say that if it's not illegal, doesn't make it any less serious? So even if it's legal, but it has the potential to impact society, like if all these social platforms collude, the power they will have is a pretty concerning issue. Would you agree with that point?
Like when the New York Post story is blocked, having been on the left, I was still against them censoring it. And like I said, we knew it was being censored at the time. I would like to see more documents, more conversations about posts and about bannings that took place that weren't related to content that broke Twitter's terms of service. If I saw that the Biden campaign was emailing Twitter and requesting certain people be banned or certain content be removed that wasn't against Twitter's terms of service, that would be alarming to me. But I haven't seen that. And maybe it's coming. Maybe this second drop, we're going to see that. But I haven't seen that yet.
Can I ask what the fundamental... Sorry, Mario, just can I ask fundamentally, and I'm asking again, none of these are tainted with intent. I'm an attorney. Everything is meant to be objective. That's the only way we can do our jobs at the beginning, and then we twist afterwards. But I seem to recall, and I'd like to hear the difference between Donald Trump during his presidency directly communicating and building narrative for Fox News with Fox News co-hosts, Hannity and others, that is not disputed during a presidency, right? I think the argument's going to be that Fox News is inherently right-leaning, therefore you have to assume it's going to push the narrative right. But I'd argue that most people, in fact, I'd hear all day on Fox News that Twitter leaned left and Twitter was terrible. And so I'm having a hard time parsing out the difference. And my guess, by the way, of why both Fox News and CNN are not focusing on the actual Twitter part of this is because in that Twitter file, it also said there were requests by the right as well. It said far less, right? But there are, I mean, you can look up, you can see the court case of the accusations against Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein for incredibly sexually violent and deplorable accusations that was then dismissed afterwards. But that story got barely any coverage. And I'm going to bet most of the people in the audience don't even know it exists. You can Google it and read it. So my guess is that a bunch more is going to come out on both sides and the collateral damage could be massive.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Twitter is a public square. Fox News is a news outlet. Fox News does not control our speech. Twitter does. Twitter, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, and so on. When you have a public space where a certain political idea is not allowed to be propagated and is a very mainstream idea, conservatism is not the fringe. It is half the country voted conservative. When you have a platform that is as large as Twitter, that is as large as Meta, controlling speech and preventing one half of the country from being able to express itself, I would argue that this is much larger than, say, Fox News promoting a certain agenda, right? Promoting Donald Trump, because people can choose to change the channel. There is an option for that. You don't really have the option for that on social media when every single social media platform decides that the only acceptable view in this world, on this whole planet, is their view. And this is the San Francisco view, that you're not allowed to question any narratives. You're not allowed to question gender ideology, for instance, or you're not allowed to question the war in Ukraine. Right, you're not allowed to question it. They ban you for that on many different places. They claim that it is promoting or glorifying war, whereas they can very easily, at the same time, call for war against Russians or call for the deaths of Russians, and that's fine. That's what these platforms allow. So I would argue that it is much bigger than simply, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC promoting a certain agenda. They can do what they like. They are private platforms. But when you have a site like Twitter or Facebook or anything else that dominates the public sphere and allows you to, allows it to shape the narrative by censoring one half of the conversation, that I would argue is much larger, right? It's a much bigger problem than, say Fox News refusing to have a progressive liberal on a show with say Tucker Carlson. And by the way, he does invite them and just refuse to come on. So there is a difference.
Ian, we are agreeing.
It wasn't just one side of the conversation. Really quickly, it was also our sitting president who was suspended wrongfully from Twitter and has been reinstated.
This has been admitted by Elon Musk himself. Yes.
So just to again to balance out conversation. So Ian, I believe. So we're saying that there's a moral equivalence between a sitting president or a non-sitting president or non-sitting vice president and a political campaign trying to accomplish something, versus a sitting president trying to drive a narrative directly to the public through an outlet that I agree is different than Twitter. I think that what that comes down to is, does Twitter deserve Section 230 protection as for publishing? And it also begs the question of, you inherently did say, without admitting it directly or saying it directly, that everybody assumes Fox News is going to be protecting the rights narrative and pushing the president's narrative. I don't think that's the same as literally being on the phone with the president and dictating narrative to go to the public, which has similar impacts. And I'm agreeing and disagreeing in different ways. Again, would it be different? Would it be different for you if Twitter had done it on its own? If Twitter had never been asked, which one was worse?
I would say
yes, that's dramatically different.
I mean, it's honestly just as bad because it shows that there is a certain bias at Twitter to promote a certain narrative. And I think that's the key here. The media likes to pretend that it's fair. When I say the media, I'm talking about the mainstream media. I'm talking about the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so on. They pretend that their view is the only acceptable view. Anyone who opposes it is a clown, right? That is the narrative, that you cannot question climate change, that you cannot question gender ideology, that you cannot question critical race theory. To do so makes you an outcast, a pariah, and try doing so in Hollywood. You will be fired immediately. Try doing so in any media organization. If you speak out, as Barry Weiss did when she spoke out against it at the New York Times, what did they do? They sacked her, right? So that is the problem here, is that the media, along with social media, has this dominant narrative, and it is well, like I said, it's dominant, and no one else is allowed to say anything about it. And now this bombshell.
You actually, Ian, you actually highlight something.
There was a bias here, an agenda.
Before I forget, you actually highlight something I brought up earlier, which is these people get fired based on risk analysis, right? They're not just, it's not like somebody like the head of the network goes, I disagree with that opinion and you're fired. There's an entire risk analysis that goes into all of these cases when there's accusations of sexual misconduct, there's accusation of doing things that would hurt the business, right? I guarantee you what they're doing is they're going, what's best for business? We have advertisers. We have
Oh, they're not doing
revenue that
things that
we
are
need to
best for
get.
business. They're not doing things that are best for business. They haven't done anything that's been best for business in a long time now, in a few years now.
So you think Twitter leans left because they're all just libs and
Yes,
it has nothing to do with
absolutely.
revenue?
Yes, over
100%.
98% of
Look at
Twitter
Google.
employees donated directly to Democrats. So yes,
Yep. Look
the
at
answer
Google.
is yes.
Here's an example. James Damore. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I was
but
just
he
thinking
an
of this.
engineer, right? He was a senior engineer at Google, and he was asked to perform an analysis of Google and how it can make itself better. Because they obviously you want to perform analysis of how to improve your business. And his solution was to provide a paper, very well researched, explaining why diversity of thought was more important than diversity of gender or diversity of race, because such things don't actually add to the company. It doesn't really add anything to the company at all to have diversity directors in there, because they don't actually add anything to the business. And so he performed a very objective analysis saying that we need to have more diversity of thought, and this will encourage more users to come view our sites. They will view it as neutral, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what did they do? They fired him. They claimed that his paper was, in fact, violent, right? It was violent against employees who felt affected. They felt emotionally impacted by what he was saying. They didn't like the fact that he was saying that they don't contribute very much to the corporation by, not actually contributing anything to the corporation. So they fired him for that. And we see this all the time. I mean, look at Disney's latest movie. It is trash, right? And I'm not saying this because I don't like Disney or anything like that, but the movie was banking on wokeness, particularly with this gender ideology stuff, and nobody bought it, right? It actually hurt their business. They're at $100 million loss. They can afford it, but at $100 million loss with this one movie, because they can't even shop it in the Middle East. They can't shop it in Asia. Nobody wants to watch it there. So they're not even going to show it there. And in the US, well, nobody wants to see it either. But they're willing to take that hit, that $100 million hit, to promote their ideology. And this is what they do. They will literally go broke just to get woke. Nobody's asking for this. So it's not about the bottom line at all. It hasn't been for a long time now. I mean, what does a company like, say, Intel get from donating $100 million to a feminist organization that promotes a gender ideology in schools? Absolutely nothing. They don't get better engineers. They certainly don't get to sell more microchips. Nobody cares about this stuff. All they should be doing is literally just making microchips, and yet that's not what they're doing. They're promoting these gender initiatives and these CRT initiatives, as well as Black Lives Matter. But they get nothing out of it.
They
Why?
get more women. They get more women joining the workforce. That's what they get out of it, and that's what they want. They need more slaves to the system. So instead of women staying home and being mothers to their children, they get women who go and join the workforce. Really quick, I just wanted to ask Mario. Did you receive the video that I sent you?
I did.
Someone
yeah.
mentioned.
So
Someone mentioned that Fox, hadn't run anything. And as a matter of fact, Hannity featured Mario's show, even referenced it as the roundtable with Elon Musk. So I don't know if you want to play the clip. It's pretty short.
Tucker Carlson had a segment on the profiles. It was his prime story. So the idea that Fox News does not cover this at all is completely false. It was covered on primetime news. And that's Tucker
Carlson. So what I mentioned about Fox News is they called it a nothing burger in one of the interviews. I saw a clip. Not criticizing them. I was just mentioning it as part of my question on why they didn't cover it. So they mentioned us. I was on the front page of Fox when they've been watching the space for a while, because they put me on the front page when I interviewed Hunter Biden and it went to shit. So Fox has been here and they talk to our team on a regular basis. But to the video that you wanted to play in this room, I'll get Ian. Do you know how to play a video in the space? Because usually Chet does it.
No,
and he's
I do not.
today.
I have no idea how to do that.
Romy will figure it out. Tara, she'll ping you now and figure it out. But I'll go to Piotr and Alex because they've had their hands up for a while. Guys, go ahead.
Can I just respond to one thing Ian said? Because I agree with it, which was like the pushback that this is driven by like bottom line somehow. Like I fundamentally do not believe that at all. Like I'm a moderate, I'm very moderate. I have friends who are both conservative and liberal. I was living in SF for years while this was happening, and I think there's one story. I have like one story that's just like so like obvious of what this is like. Is like I remember we had like an OpMex meeting for what it was like internally, where we're going over metrics and things like that. And literally like right before this, I wanted to go try to get lunch. I have an ad all day. I only have like 15 minutes. And there's like a drag queen show in the LinkedIn cafeteria. Like, I don't give a fuck what anyone wants to do. Like, if people want to go to drag queen shows, that's fine. But like, I literally was slowed down from going to get my lunch because they had drag queens like giving employees like dances and stuff like in the middle of the cafeteria. And then I had to go grab my food and then go to an Amex meeting. So like, I think in a nutshell, this, like, I agree with the point, and it's like, it was just too much. And this is from someone who is like very like open-minded about this stuff. It's like, I just don't see how you're gonna have like objective things when it's very clear that there's like only one type of culture that is absolutely pulsing through a company. And this is not limited to just Twitter. This is Silicon Valley writ large.
Wouldn't that be the issue, Piotr? I don't know, Piotr, if you've got the mic, if it works on your end, because I tried to give it to you earlier. So you have to unmute. Cool. I'll just add one point to Alex, and I'll let you jump in because you've been waiting for ages. But Ian, I've got a question for you before giving the mic to Piotr. Is this an issue of censorship or politics, or is it just an issue of entities just having too much power?
I believe it's a combination of all these things, but more than anything else, I believe it is a issue of culture. The monoculture, which is the establishment's culture, the San Francisco's progressive culture, is fragile. And when it's fragile, it lashes out. It tries to defend itself. And how does it defend itself? By censoring other people, by censoring alternate points of view. Anybody who disagrees is now deemed a fascist or racist or sexist or anything else, a bigot, basically. And that is how it lashes out. And in order to lash out, in order to silence the opposition, what do these people do? Well, they attain positions of power. We saw this at Twitter, where they literally had the reins of the company. We see this in administrations, in government administrations, for instance, with the appointments of people like Admiral Rachel Levine, who is literally promoting transgendering children. Right, that is their sole objective, to get into positions of power. We see this in colleges. What do? They abuse Title IX to suppress anyone who dares to speak out against the administration, against their policies. And what happens to even tenured professors? They get fired. People like Jordan Peterson are canceled. Student unions hold an amazing, a ridiculous amount of power in colleges, to the point where even the school administrators are terrified of them. They ban people like Ben Shapiro from speaking on college campuses. This is the amount of power that they have, and they're not willing to give it up. And they will use anything in their ordinance to silence threats to their system, because they want that safe space, right? They call it a safe space, but really it is a way to dominate everybody else. It is a monoculture that is in the midst of taking over the entire Western world, if not the world itself. And that's the reason why countries like, say, China and Russia are actually clamping down and fighting back against this. Countries like Hungary are fighting back against this. Countries like Italy are fighting back against this, precisely because of this monoculture. It's a threat to civilization. I know it sounds a bit hyperbolic, but it's true. There's a reason why countries like Qatar or Russia have recently implemented bans on LGBTQ ideology. Now, you can totally be gay there if you want to be, but you cannot promote this stuff because it is very insidious, right? It is more than just living your life free. It's not about tolerance anymore. You can be tolerant of anybody you want, but they're promoting an ideology that you're not allowed to question. For instance, can you misgender somebody right now? You're not allowed to. Most platforms will ban you from misgendering somebody, even if they only just now come out as a woman or something. You will be banned for it if you even dare to question them. And that's the reason why it seems like we're living in clown world right now, because you're supposed to accept what they say and you're not allowed to question it. But if you try to present your own opinion, then you're a bad guy, right? That's literally how they deal with it.
Yeah, so I'll let you go. I know, Brian, you got to go, and Piotr as well. But before we do that, I'll just refresh the room very briefly. I've tweeted and pinned above the space for the next room. So while you're listening, register for that one, so you get notified for the next one. And we're waiting together now, as we did last time, for the next drop by Twitter that we'll all analyze together and debate. And don't know if we'll have special guests again jump in. So that's a quick refresher, but I'll let Piotr and Brian. Brian, do you mind if Piotr jumps in first, because he's been waiting for a while?
No problem.
Then, Piotr, go ahead, man, and then Brian.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflation going on, a lot among different things. I mean, Hungary is regressing; it's not progressing. Viktor Orban has centralized control. He's made the opposition effectively non-existent, and he's politicized the judiciary. So I wouldn't use Hungary as a good example of media freedom and independence.
Well, couldn't you say the same thing about Brazil? Because they have politicized the judiciary to the far left, to the point where conservatives,
I wasn't disputing the potential for there to be a politicalization of the judiciary. My point is that, be it on the far right or the far left, you have to be very concerned by an over-censorship problem. I agree with much of what you said. I think that I have Republican friends who live in California, and they're actively scared to admit that they are Republicans because of this, the backlash that they would get from, very progressive communities within California. So I think that that's certainly
you risk having your car vandalized if you. I'm in California. If you even put anything out there, you risk having your house vandalized, your car vandalized. So yes, that's 100% true.
Yeah, so I think that it can occur on both sides, is what I'm saying. I have a huge problem with the imposition of certain narratives, or the idea being that you have to be labeled, or you will be labeled a certain thing if you don't align with a certain set of values. But I do think it's important not to conflate every single piece of media or every single country with different media outlets as being the same. Different countries have very different approaches to media coverage, ideological variances. The Overton window, as it's known academically, varies significantly between countries. Now, in America, the predominant media is dominated by the left. There is not really many right-wing mainstream media outlets that cover conservative news. Fox News is the main one, but it's not actually categorized as news. It's categorized as entertainment. And what I do find interesting is that what Fox News were the ones to actually step away from Trump. When he gave his massive speech about him running again, they cut off after an hour and started running reruns. So I think it's pretty varied. The other thing I would just say to Mario's question from earlier was about, why is this not getting much coverage from the media? Sure, is there a degree of uncertainty or uncomfortability around it? Possibly, but it may just be because they just don't know whether or not it's something to worthwhile be reporting on yet. Are we not overextending how important it's going to be? That's not necessarily my opinion.
Do you know who owns the media? Who owns the corporate media?
Well, again, I've been having this debate with people in the comments. Define corporate media. Define which media, which country, which topics are you talking about?
Democrat donors and progressives.
Well, that's in America.
Question the climate narrative, for instance, because Getty Harris, she's the one donating all the money to it. So that's the reason why we're not allowed to talk about it, right? I mean, you can't talk about it, but it gets shut down.
Could it be a business reason they're not covering this? Nothing political. They're like, hey, they're disrupting our business model on Twitter Spaces. People are going there instead of watching our shows.
Absolutely. I mean,
so it could be purely business related.
Not purely business related, definitely not. It's very much ideologically related, but it's partly business related because, first of all, their readers are like an echo chamber. They don't want to give their readers anything that the readers don't want to hear, right? That's a problem of bias. That's a problem of being a slave to your readership, and they definitely do suffer from that as much as anybody else. There's a reason why a lot of conservative outlets, except for, I guess, Fox News, are unwilling to put down Donald Trump when he says something really, really stupid. They don't say anything about it because it makes them look bad, and their readers certainly don't want it. They don't want to lose their readership, right? So same reason that New York Times will not report on anything that makes them look bad, because it makes them lose credibility with their own readership. So of course, yeah, there is a business reason for it, and it's quite disgusting when you think about it, especially if these publications claim to be neutral and claim to, want to save democracy from darkness, and yet they are the darkness that is permeating society. So
I think Ian, just to that point,
Brian, I'll let you make that point, Piotr, and then we'll go to Brian. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, no, just I think the other thing that happens a lot with these sort of things is that you get a degree of, well, again, conflation is the word I'm going to use, but sort of you think, like, some people are accusing me, obviously, immediately in my bio and messages because I have the World Bank in my profile, and therefore people conflate that therefore I'm part of some corporate Illuminati World Economic Forum related sort of globalist agenda, when actually there's quite a little bit of a distinction between global media outlets, the World Bank, the UN, the WEF. Yes, people of these places have overlaps, but it doesn't mean it's all interrelated. And it pushes for me a broader sort of narrative around anti-establishment, which again I can understand. And that's why crypto as a concept is very appealing, because it means you don't have to be reliant on the prevailing order, the prevailing system. And to Ian's point about the New York Times, for example, the New York Times came out and made some very sort of deliberate comments about the Iranian protests, when actually those comments were predominantly in line with what the Biden administration wants, which is more diplomatic engagement with the regime. And the Iranian people don't want that. They want regime change. And the New York Times toes this line of sort of moderacy with the prevailing government or more democratic aligned views, because they don't want to sort of be seen as pushing for a maximalist pressure of, you know, sanctions and regime change.
I don't know why you guys are focusing though on the media outlets. This is a story about the platforms. The platforms are way, way, way more powerful than any individual media outlet. You can talk about different countries being in different places, but the reality is that 90% of social media daily active users are from US-based companies. And the problem is, if you own the rails, if you own the distribution, then you can manipulate the town square and only allow one type of voice to come out. That is what the Twitter files are about, ultimately, more than anything else.
So
it's about the mechanics of the platforms.
I agree with you, Alex. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point.
I think one of the reasons you see the media not covering certain things, the Twitter files, but even going back to the New York Post Hunter Biden laptops case, the media has sourcing requirements. At least a lot of the media does. Some of the smaller companies, their requirements are obviously not as stringent. But at the time when the New York Post story came out, it was only shared with the New York Post. The laptop was only shared with the New York Post. Giuliani offered snippets of emails to some other outlets, I think maybe the Washington Post or Washington Times, and the New York Times, but he didn't offer the full contents of the laptop. So immediately it was caution for these other outlets, especially the mainstream media outlets that wanted all this material. And they didn't want snippets. They needed to know, is this legit? Where did it come from? And their requirements.
So one of the main points is exactly what you're saying. That's the government. 50 former intelligence officials signed a letter casting doubt on that story. That's not just random people saying it's false. They specifically said in that letter that they believe it is Russian disinformation, which is something we now know is false. So there is
this was the Trump administration, by the way. These were 51 Trump administration officials, just to point
No,
that
it wasn't.
out.
It wasn't 51 Trump administration officials. It was literally
it was.
former officials who used to work for Obama.
Yeah,
and furthermore,
in Trump's
rebut your
administration.
claim, I would argue that the sourcing requirement thing is not true, because the New York Post was able to substantiate where it got the laptop.
They got it from Giuliani.
Yeah, I know that, but the laptop.
Brian, can you please let Ian just finish what he's saying before you chime in, just because it's really difficult to hear him.
Yeah, so the laptop was verified as not being stolen or hacked materials. The claim that it was is, well, it's patently ridiculous. We know that now. But even then, the media was very quick. When I say the media, I mean like everybody except for the New York Post was happy to discredit it based on what some intelligence officials claimed it was, right? They didn't have any evidence. They didn't even see it themselves. And yet they ran with that story because that was what fit the narrative. Whereas the New York Post actually published it because they did have the source materials, the way to back up the veracity of what they were claiming, and able to prove that it wasn't hacked materials. It wasn't, some Russian disinformation source that gave them this material, right? Like they actually were able to back it up. And yet Twitter, in spite of all of this, in spite of the fact that the article itself sources where they got the materials from, refused to go along with it and played this card, this idea that it was hacked materials, because it seemed like a legitimate reason to shut them down. And the media just simply ran with it. The New York Times called it disinformation. Politico was probably the first organization with Natasha Bertrand citing 50 intelligence officials claiming it was false. This idea that there are sourcing requirements, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, Watergate, what kind of sourcing requirements did that have? You have the materials. What sourcing requirements do you need? Does it even matter if it was hacked? I mean, it wasn't. But if let's say it was hacked materials. So what? The story is of national importance. You would think that there would be a larger push to make the truth known, and yet the media colluded with social media companies to shut this story down because it was so embarrassing to Biden at the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with some of what you say there. I think that, like I said before, I think it was wrong for Twitter to block that story. But what I'm saying is that the New York Post was provided with the actual material. These other news organizations weren't provided with it. So it's Giuliani and Bannon's word against whatever's out there. Whereas the New York Post had this material in their possession. And still there were questions. Yes, this is a laptop. Yes, this material is on this laptop. But the chain of custody of that laptop and the information, it was a mess. Ask any expert in cybersecurity, and there were like 3 or 4 accounts that logged into that laptop that downloaded information from it. So it couldn't be verified. And I think that was the problem. I'm not saying it was right that media companies didn't
verified it 2 years later when it was no longer a story.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the problem though. But they didn't have
easily
the,
ran
they
with
didn't
the
have the
story
laptop
at
in
the time
their
it was
possession
released,
at
but
the
they
time.
just chose not to. They chose not to verify it because they were more than happy to downplay
They couldn't verify it. They
No,
didn't
they
have
didn't want to verify it. There's a
No,
difference between
no.
included versus them wanting
They
to.
couldn't verify it because Giuliani only gave the contents to the New York Post. They tried to get the New York Times and the Washington Post both tried to get the contents, and Giuliani refused to give it to them.
So to refresh the space, if you don't mind, Ian, just for the new audience, we're up to 11.6K listeners. What are we waiting for in terms of the drops?
Right.
What what has dropped so far today? And a quick
Okay.
2-minute overview on what happened 2-3 days
quick
ago.
2-minute overview on what happened. Easy. Okay, so as we all know, the files dropped last weekend on Friday, late Friday, with what's his face, Matt Taibbi, right? He released those files, and today he released a supplemental addendum to the files release, and he explained why it's been delayed. So here goes. In a thread, he tweeted that on Friday, the first installment of the Twitter files was published here. We expected to publish more over the weekend. Many wondered why there was a delay. Good question. We can now tell you part of the reason why. On Tuesday, Twitter Deputy General Counsel and former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker was fired. Now, Elon Musk announced it earlier that this guy has been exited from the company. Among the reasons, vetting the first batch of the Twitter files without knowledge of new management. So this guy was in charge of basically the dissemination of those files, and he decided to sit on it. The process for producing the Twitter files involved delivery to 2 journalists, Barry Weiss and me being Matt Taibbi, through a lawyer close to the new management being, of course, Elon Musk. However, after the initial batch, things became complicated. Over the weekend, while we were both dealt with obstacles to new searches, meaning that they were prevented from actually searching through the files, it was Barry Weiss who discovered that the person in charge of releasing the files was someone named Jim. When she asked who Jim's last name was, the answer came back, Jim Baker. My jaw hit the floor, says Weiss. The first batch of the files both reporters received was marked Spectra Baker emails. Baker is a very controversial figure. He has been something of a zealot of FBI controversies dating back to 2016 from the Steele dossier. Now, if you guys remember, the Steele dossier was the fake document produced by the Hillary Clinton campaign at the time to discredit Donald Trump and to tie him to Russian agents. None of that was real. It was later disproven to be a hoax. To the Alpha server mess. He resigned in 2018 after an investigation into leaks to the press. The news that Baker was reviewing the Twitter files surprised everyone involved, to say the least. New Twitter chief Elon Musk acted very quickly to exit Baker on Tuesday. That's today. Reporters resumed searches through the Twitter files material, a lot of it today. The next installment of the Twitter files will appear at Barry Weiss. Stay tuned. So that's where we are at so far. So it seems that this Jim Baker character suppressed the release of the Twitter files. He was delaying it for whatever reason. Perhaps he's implicated in them. There's no doubt. But we'll see what they have to uncover very, very soon. We don't have a date yet, though.
And we don't have a date for the next drop, you mean?
No, we don't. Yeah.
Okay. So okay. So Elon or the other gentleman said that the drop will, await the drop, but they didn't hint on whether it will be in a few hours or in a few days?
No, we have no idea. And Barry Weiss tweeted out after Matt Taibbi's thread. She said, "It's been quite a weekend. So we know for a fact that the two of them have been sifting through the files. There's a lot more to go through. It was just that it's delayed because of Jim Baker. He was suppressing the release of the files. And if you look at Elon Musk and what he tweeted, you'll see that I can read his tweet if I can actually find it.
Okay, and while you find it, what we'll do is we'll ping both everyone involved to try to get. If anyone in the audience can ping the was it Matt that's doing the next, or Barry that's doing the next drop?
It's Barry who's doing the next drop.
Barry. Okay, so if anyone can ping Barry and get an answer on when that drop.
So I found a tweet. Yeah, and Elon also tweeted an additional thing. So he was responding to a tweet by Matt Taibbi about 6 degrees from Jim Baker. I recommend that you fellas read it. I will put it in the at the top there. So it's 6 degrees from Jim Baker. A familiar figure reemerges with the release of the Twitter files. It's written by Jonathan Turley. He's very credible lawyer, right? And Elon Musk replied to it and said, "In light of concerns about Baker's possible role in suppression of information important to the public dialogue, he was exited from Twitter today." Now, in a further tweet, somebody asked him, was he asked to explain himself first, right? This is a good question. Elon Musk replied and said, yes. His explanation was ... unconvincing. There we go. So he was actively suppressing the release of the Twitter files.
I'm guilty of making an assumption, Ian. I thought Elon was delaying the drop because it didn't get enough attention by mainstream media. They're like, "Hey, we need a new strategy." But obviously, I was far from the truth.
Yeah, I think he wants it all out.
So if anyone can message Barry to get an idea of when the drop will be, I think we got a hint from Matt last time, from Kim or you, Ian, I can't remember. That would be great. Also for the audience, if that's your first time here, the comment button, bottom right corner, you can ask your questions here. My team is all awake now. We woke them all up. So they'll go through your questions and we can send them through to the panel to answer them for you. So feel free to ask your questions. Fidgeto, Alex, go ahead, guys.
Really quick, Mario, is there any way yet to play that clip, or if anyone here has a secondary device that they could play it from live in here, I can send it to you in your DMs?
Yeah, so good point. Any speaker that can play an audio file for the space. Usually Chet does this, but he's not working today. If there's no one here, I'll try to figure it out with Romy now. All right, if anyone can DM me, you all have my number. Everyone on the panel has my number. Otherwise, I'll give the mic to Fidgeto and Alex. Go ahead, guys.
Hey, brother. Just for purposes of as we're doing a reset, because there isn't, and this is no knock, and please nobody jump off the fucking rails for the statement, because there isn't either left or moderate co-hosts on the space, and no insult, guys, just a fact. I just wanted to kind of start the conversation and trying to identify exactly what the conversation's about. So is the problem that either political party or whether they're government or non-government, but political party directly or indirectly reaches out to non-government or public/private social media platforms? Is it the problem that the platforms entertain it and decide to say yes to one and likely no to the others? Is it the impact? Is it the timing of that, an impact on what would be an election? Is it the facts of the information in the laptop, which we can all agree most likely had stuff of Biden getting money from Ukraine and other stuff that shouldn't have happened, period. I'm just trying to make sure we're identifying stuff instead of conflating with gender bias and who owns the media and Hollywood. I'll
answer it, Fidgetal. So your first point about the panel. So you don't know my political stance at all, and I try to keep it private because I want to be as unbiased as possible.
No, I think you're more moderate, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm extremely moderate. But back to the question though. So me and you, we do a lot of panels on the metaverse. Yeah, we talk about our life is all virtual now. Decades ago, word spreads, person to person or newspapers. Now everything is virtual. So when there is entities like Twitter, like Meta, that have the opportunity to impact people's opinion or change the narrative for the most powerful country in the world, I don't care what political, whether they're more on the left or on the right, For me, that's the major issue. I think everything else, I'm not saying it's not an issue, it's just a lot less important in my opinion. Biden's laptop, while it is important, I just don't give it that same importance as Twitter having the ability to change the narrative as they please. And that applies whether Elon runs Twitter, and I think he's heading down the right path. But imagine Elon sells it to someone else, and that other person has a different way of running the business and wants to implement their ideologies on Twitter, or Meta goes down that path. So
But
that's
just to highlight,
the
just to highlight, I think everybody with half a brain and either assumed and or knew or should have known that Twitter and other social media platforms do that already. So I think it's really that, not just that, but that it was directly linked to requests, right?
Can I just point out this is Sebastian? So am I the only one here who like, what is the main issue? Did you just see what Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss posted? The former senior FBI agent who was at the center, like Forrest Gump, of the Steele dossier, the attempt to discredit the political candidate for the presidency, who's at the center of the Hunter Biden cover-up and the Clinton investigation, was the deputy general counsel for Twitter and was filtering and sanitizing the first drop of information the new CEO of Twitter was giving to us. I mean, am I the only one who's not on drugs at this moment? I mean, seriously, if that doesn't illustrate the seriousness of the situation, and then lastly, none of the 51 intelligence agents were Trump appointees. They were all permanent staff, bureaucrats, SISs, or Obama holdovers. So let's get some facts here. That tweet alone illustrates the nature of the issue we are dealing with. A senior FBI agent at the center of some of the most corrupt operations in the last 20 years ends up at Twitter and ends up filtering the documents the new owner is trying to share with us. It is the microcosm of everything we're talking about.
Just to expand on
Thank
that.
you, Sebastian.
Well said.
Appreciate
Well
that.
said.
You're welcome.
I was thinking that
Brilliant.
if that news in and of itself, Jim Baker being at Twitter and doing this, that should be headline news on every major news source right now. And the fact that it isn't tells you a lot about the media these days. And another thing, there is so much infiltration by the government into these social media platforms. I don't think anyone's really surprised that Jim Baker was in that position. They intentionally place people on these social media platforms in those positions for that purpose. Just my opinion.
I can also bring it, I think, back to you, Digital, because, Mario, I've been doing these spaces with him for a while. A lot of the topics are, often around, decentralized finance and crypto. And I actually think there is a common theme in all these that shows just really how scary this can all get. And the theme with that is that when systems get more and more centralized, they have a tendency to not deserve to have that centralization and power because they get corrupt. This has happened throughout history. And as of right now, we're seeing a large amount of centralization in some of the most important systems in the world. We see it with the financial system, but honestly, the social media world is even more centralized than the financial system. Like, if you're worried about, like, put it another way, Digital, like, if you want to take a more like abstract view of this, if you're into crypto, if you're into the finance side of crypto, those same exact principles that should have brought you to Bitcoin or to crypto should be the exact same things that should be putting off sirens for what's going on with social media. Because if you have this concentration of information in the rails and everything's moving digital, that means it doesn't matter what party's in charge. It shows the power they have to manipulate it. And to be honest, like, this isn't even a conspiracy theory anymore. We've seen it firsthand. The Twitter files are a great example of what can happen at scale when this happens, but then we're also already seeing it with finance. Like
what's not a conspiracy theory? Sorry, Alex. Which
this idea of censorship on both a social as well as a financial level. We see it on the social level with the Twitter files, but then on the financial level with PayPal is sneaking wording into their terms of service that allows them to take money from your bank account if you say things that they don't align with. And this isn't like
sorry, say that. Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that again, Alex.
So PayPal recently, and these things are all related in my opinion, which is that PayPal recently said they had something in their terms of service where they would take money from your account with them if they found you on social media saying information that went against their terms of service. And this wasn't just like, randoms bringing this up. This was brought up by David Sachs, who was the original COO, literally PayPal Mafia, pointing this out. And so that's just like the theme, if people, because I see people tweeting sometimes, I don't like talking about politics, but these things are all interrelated. The centralization of social media and media flows is very simple, is very related to finance. It's all just information when you put it in a digital sense.
And to answer your question as well, Fidgetal, about everyone knows the bias. I admit when I'm wrong, and I was naive enough a while ago to think that the systems on those social platforms did not allow for those sort of things to happen. The systems were beyond any wishes by people, by executives there. Obviously, this proves it wrong, and I've seen a lot of things happen, including Brian, your story, for example, and many other stories that prove it wrong. But I'm one of, I'm sure, many that trusted social platforms. Brian, do you wanted to say something?
I want to really quick, if that's okay, Mario.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to say to begin the statement with everyone knows it's happening, and then end it with, I'm one of the people who wasn't aware, just goes to show you that everyone doesn't know it's happening, and that's the issue. And then the fact that the media is still now censoring the information, just like Seb just said, this should be headline news everywhere, that an FBI operative essentially was suppressing the new CEO of Twitter from releasing these files publicly. I mean, why? The media's silence speaks volumes.
And before you go, sorry guys, Brian, before you go, Matt, I know you're trying to come up. Put your hand down. Message me on WhatsApp. I'll try to bring you up. It's glitching, Matt Wallace. So put your hand down, bro, and I'll send you an invite via DM because the app is starting to glitch. Whoever
I can do it for you, Mario.
Oh yeah, if you can bring up Matt, that would be great. There's a spot on the panel. Sorry, whoever was speaking, go ahead, bro.
Just to extrapolate really quickly on what Alex was saying about PayPal, I mean, it's even worse than most people realize. So what that controversy was about, and this is unbelievable, and this is just a quintessential example on the overreach of power on these companies right now, on our basic civil liberties, in my opinion. So what PayPal was doing, in their updated terms of service, was they could legally make the decision to fine users $2,000 if they were found to be posting or spreading what they deemed to be hate speech. Okay, nothing to do with the app, nothing to do with your activity within the app of PayPal. Okay, so they took down that terms of service after there was a stir up about it, but then they reinstated it now again. So it is there right now. So technically,
so just to understand this, bro. Sorry, Stephen. So what you're saying is that PayPal can deduct $2,000 from your account without your authority if you post. Please tell me if I'm wrong, because it's important.
That is correct. Yes, they can actually do that. It's in their terms of service.
It's 2,500, not 2,000.
Oh, sorry, 2,500. Thank you. You're correct. Yeah, and I have since stopped accepting PayPal through my business because of this. It's just ridiculous on principle. It's unbelievably Orwellian. And I know people throw that term around a lot. But
it's a concept that is being used by the Chinese regime. Just so you know where it came from.
I'd say so. I play devil's advocate, and don't hate me for it, guys. I'm not saying I agree with it. I think this is wrong, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate. If you do something illegal on the street, the authorities have the right to fine you, and you have to pay your fine if you go above the speed limit by a bit, etc. So what PayPal's doing is prevent. I think we all agree hate speech. There's no place, that should be accepted. So PayPal's just trying to prevent hate speech, which sounds good, but the concern, in my opinion, is that again we're giving a centralized entity to just too much power.
And it's
despite
Mario,
they don't actually explain what hate speech is.
Yeah,
right?
Mario, define hate speech.
Yeah, with the
Exactly.
law.
Well, not to mention,
Quite
not to
often-
mention,
quite
you just said you're fined for breaking the law. They aren't breaking the law for exercising freedom of speech. They're, unless they're, you know, tried and convicted, then yeah, okay, maybe then, you know, they incur the fine. But you just implied that they're breaking a law. There's no law being broken, and that's
And there's
not
no
in the
way to
terms of
fight back,
service.
right? There's no
Good point.
appeals process. They literally decide that you have broken their law and that they have the ability to unilaterally penalize you for it without your consent or not. And they will simply take your use of the service as consent. Your silence is consent. And this is a rule that they've implemented recently. It's not an old rule, right? It's not like you're paying your taxes and they tell you exactly what the law is. For instance, in real life, right? If you were to break the law, there are penal codes explaining what law it is you broke, and you can fight your case in court.
Ian, I don't know this exact thing. I can guarantee you there's consent. I'll guarantee you that their attorneys made that there is consent. So please, when you're speaking to a crowd of 11,000 people, speak clearly and factually. I'll guarantee you there is consent. It's a multi-billion-dollar company.
The problem is with hate speech, quite often these companies are defining it as anything that they disagree with. There's nothing. It's not what you think is hate speech. They define hate speech as you having a different opinion than they do.
Well, Elon Musk,
it's just way out of bounds.
I also want to be devil's advocate here and just ask to Alex's point about Spotify, because you know there's been plenty of musical artists that don't use it because they don't agree with certain terms of service or whatever it is. And I think this is something I've heard in this space as well, which is if it's a privately owned company, you know, they can do what they will. That's a term I've heard people use in reference to Twitter. Now that it's owned by Musk, he can do what he wants with it. So surely if you don't like the mandate or agenda that the company have, be it left wing or right wing or whatever, don't use the company. I mean, I'm not saying whether or not it's the right thing, but
it's hard. I was just gonna. Who's speaking? Oh, Matt, is you? I'll let you go, Matt. Just quickly, I was gonna say first, I did a pretty good job playing devil's advocate, didn't I, Ian? I said that thing and just kind of everyone blew up.
You set people up. Good job.
Yeah, I did. I like it.
But it's good. It's good to have conversation. This is what spaces are for.
So I'll let Matt Wallace go.
And Elon Musk just tweeted that he said, only discovered this on Sunday. He was responding to Eric Weinstein, who asked, I can't quite believe what I'm reading, so let's go slow. The FBI's former attorney, whom Sebastian explained to us who he was and why he is important, why he's a big deal, was hired by the previous Twitter administration and was the one vetting the files to be given to Barry Weiss and Matt Taibbi that might reveal FBI collusion. And the new owner, Elon Musk, was not told any of this, right? That was the question. And Elon responded, said, only discovered this on Sunday.
Man, first I want to applaud you, Ian, that you spotted this within less than a minute, man. So you've got, I don't know what system you have, but nicely done. Matt, I know you were speaking and I interrupted you, man.
Yes, all good. And I believe the system Ian has his notifications from Elon Musk's tweets on Telegram. Is that right, Ian?
Yeah, they've got that. Ian and Elon has got a bromance going on Twitter. I was just checking it out today. I'm like, oh, these guys go way back.
And so the point I was going to make though is, so he was saying, okay, well, you can just switch companies, right? There's no problem. Why not just go to a different payment service? Well, that's where it starts to get scary, because you look at Netflix, 99.6% donations to Democrat, Twitter, 98.7%, Airbnb, 97.8%, Apple, 97.5%. That's probably the most important one.
Holy
then
shit.
97, Lyft, 96, Google Alphabet. We go all the way down the list. PayPal, eBay, Tesla, Salesforce, Microsoft, Amazon, all of them above 90%. Then of all the tech companies, the only one that's even remotely not biased is Oracle, and they're at 66%.
And so Oracle is pro-China, so let's keep that in mind. They're literally the ones developing China's social credit system. So there you go.
So Brian, like what Matt just said, Brian, do you agree? Because I know you're more on the left. Do you agree that this is pretty concerning? Because these guys hold the keys to our life pretty much now. Like I was saying in a space a couple of months back, I was like, I'd rather have my passport banned from half the countries on this planet versus having my socials blocked. So that's how much influence they have now, and that's increasing year by year. So seeing them all lean to one side of politics, or one ideology, would you agree that is concerning, Brian?
I don't know if I'd say it's concerning. I think you got to dig into why that is the case. And I think it's probably the case because the corporations figure that by supporting left-leaning causes that they're going to be more profitable. Any business is going to seek profitability. Their boards of directors are going to seek profitability. And you might want to question, why is it that they are supporting Democrats when Republicans are the ones who say that they're pro-business? I mean, I think that's a good question you ask.
It's
Circling
ideologically
back,
driven.
I just want to say, like, we talk about like PayPal's policy about hate speech and other corporations. I mean, Elon Musk himself has come out and said, we will not allow hate speech. Now, the question is, where is that line drawn? What is hate speech? How do you define hate speech? Do you say it's hate speech if it's illegal? But how do you define what's illegal? Is it based on what your lawyers say, what somebody else's lawyers say? So it's a gray area. You don't have just a cut and dry line that you can say, okay, these people are going to be banned from Twitter, these are going to be banned from PayPal. Every company is going to have some sort of line, and it's going to be different based on basically the boards of directors and what they decide for those companies.
Moreover, I'd just add to
legal,
that that
hang on.
Go on, Sebastian.
Illegal speech is not
But
subjective.
but who defines illegal?
It's defined. No, it's defined in the code of the country. It's
Yeah,
it's very
but
simple.
what I'm saying is that
whether
Elon.
it's child porn, whether it's incitement to specific violence, these aren't. The lawyer doesn't just make a decision. But can I just point out one thing that everybody seems to be missing? The trend here. Remember what we were told on Thursday. We were told that Twitter was acquiescing to the political requests for deletions and suspensions without the CEO knowing. That was Jack Dorsey. What did we find out an hour ago? They're still doing it with the new owner. I mean, this is the important point, that the people inside the machine, that is the most important media source for information, are unilaterally deciding censorship actions without telling the actual owner or CEO of the company. That's the real story, in my opinion.
And I just want to add to what Mario asked, which was, is this about, well, he said the word ideology. And I think that ideology is a very broad term to use. Again, this is why I keep mentioning the word conflation, because I think, what kind of ideology are you talking about? What part of the world are you talking about? We've got to be very specific when you're talking.
Well, obviously talking about San Francisco ideology. I mean, what else is there?
Well, because I can have some things that align with San Francisco. I was going to call it Frankenstein then. Well, maybe it's Frankensteinian ideology.
It's a fine line.
I align with everything. So I think we need to stop using such broad terms and be very specific when we're talking about something. Is it climate change?
I think that the audience is really aware when we refer to ideology, we're talking about left-wing progressive ideology, the same ideology that these San Franciscans promote and espouse.
But not everyone aligns with San Franciscan ideology.
No, but they're the ones in power. They're the ones who have the dominant narrative. They control the social media platforms. They control the media. They control the administrations, the school administrations. This is the one line that we're allowed to tout. And if we go against it, we find ourselves canceled. Now, I'm not talking about people who go far out of bounds, like by praising Hitler or something. Like, those people are on the outs on any spectrum, right? On any spectrum.
Well, you would hope. You would hope.
On the main line.
That isn't always the case. Unfortunately, that isn't always the case.
But it's the case here. It is the case here. This is what I'm talking about here and now in contemporary
setting. You need to make that very clear, because people might not.
It's quite clear to I think anybody in the audience.
I want to quickly just applaud all the panelists. I'm just going through. I just tweeted enjoying the debate, and I've gone through like 28 comments, and only one said no with a small complaint. So that's probably the best response we've had of any debate. I think it's just because, Brian, you've joined for the first time, so all the credit goes to you, I guess. So I appreciate all the panelists for doing this. By the way, anyone, just a reminder as we wait for the next drop, the pinned tweet above is for the next space. You got to register for that one to get notified. It's the second pinned tweet above, and it's on my profile as well. Alex, you've been waiting for a while, man. Jump in, and then Fidgetal.
Yeah, I just wanted to try to tie like a few of the things, that were said together, which is, I think Matt hit the nail on the head, which is that for a lot of these industries, we really are only one or two companies away from it being as centralized as a government like China. I mean, in China, you have entire industries that are basically run by the CCP. And, you know, if you look over at the US, some of the most important industries, right, whether it's financial or tech or social media, they're not monopolies per se, but they are oligopolies. And I think where the risk comes between, you know, the interplay between regulators, tech people, and social is that, you know, you're expecting these same regulators to ensure that we have fair and competitive environments, while at the same time, right, in cahoots with some of the large platforms themselves. And so I think that's where the danger comes. And I think that's why it is correct to call it a machine, because when you see it coordinated, moving coordination like this, that's where, in my opinion, it's bigger than a single company. It's more speaking to how do you build the mechanics and the protocol of a country that we all want to live in.
Alex, I wanna add one thing. And again, for anyone that doesn't, so we come from the Web3 world, so we're deep into crypto. And one thing we talk about is the digital world and how we're all moving to the cheesy term, the metaverse. And I just want to give you an idea of why this is, in my opinion, very serious. You know, I've traveled the world talking about the metaverse, and you know, we've had some very influential people, leaders of some of the top tech companies, say that the metaverse, which is just a virtual world, like we're in the metaverse right now, we're in spaces, we're not in the physical world, we're kind of tuned out from the physical world. The metaverse will be bigger than any single economy, will be potentially bigger than all economies combined. And again, these are intelligent people making those statements as we all shift to a virtual world, and we've been doing that for many years, decades now. So the reason I'm saying this is that virtual world, and one of the things I talk about in my speeches is that could that be, you know, it's not going to be a utopian world, but it could be a dystopian world. Why? If central entities, whether it's Apple or Meta or Twitter is much smaller, if any entities control the tech, the ecosystem in that virtual world, like for example, Meta controls Instagram, Facebook, etc. TikTok controls TikTok. If those companies will essentially act as the governments of the physical world, because they'll control what we say, they'll control, like if someone, Brian, what happened when you got, and I'm using you as an example because I know your story and we met a few months ago, but for example, when you had your Twitter account suspended, you were completely silenced, like your whole life just changed because some executive at that company decided to just, for whatever reason, decided to suspend your account. So I think, and this is a few years, 3 years ago, imagine 10 years from now, when there is any company that has the ability to just shut someone down. It's the same thing that China does. When China disagrees with someone, what they do, and maybe Ian, you can add on to this because I think you know a lot about China, or anyone else. When China disagrees with someone, what they do is they don't allow them to board a plane. They don't allow them to board a train. They don't allow them to.
Passports get taken away. Their internal passports are removed.
Yeah, this is like, this is that
across states.
Exactly. And we all agree this is not right. And there's a guy that was proving that Kung Fu, that's a crazy story. He was proving that Kung Fu was not as good as people make it out to be. And he was a kickboxer, and he was just fighting one Kung Fu fighter after another and beating them. And then China saw this as an attack on their culture. And they did this to him. They canceled him. So he can't travel, he can't move, he doesn't have an identity, nothing at all. The Twitter, Meta, etc., have that same ability now, whether it's the left or the right. I think this is, and the reason I've interrupted you, Alex, because we've talked about the concept of the metaverse so many times over the last few months. This is a perfect example of how that virtual life, that metaverse life, could head in on a dystopian path. So that would be my biggest concern out of all this, beyond everything else. I know I mentioned this already, but I just want to make that point again.
From Will Chamberlain's point of view, right? I used to work for the guy. He's very smart, and he pointed out how more so than anything else, your online digital footprint, meaning your Twitter account, your Facebook account, your YouTube account, and so on, are basically your businesses. It's part of your livelihood. You can't build a brand if you're banned from Twitter. You can't build a brand if you're banned from TikTok or Facebook, especially if you're running a business. And if you're a celebrity, even more so. If you're an influencer, even more so, right? If you're a public speaker, if you are banned from Twitter, that's it for you, right? You are not getting any more public appearances. It's very difficult unless you're already established in the space. Look at what happened to Katie Hopkins. She used to have 1 million followers, and now she's more or less invisible because she was banned from Twitter for misgendering somebody. Now, he pointed out, and this is a very good point, is that a state, say a government, cannot simply take away your business, your license to operate your business. You can't do that without significant legal ramifications. It has to go through the courts to shut you down, right? It has to prove that you have done something illegal in order to shut down your business. Now, the difference is with Twitter, with Facebook, and YouTube, they can simply ban your ass without any sort of procedure, right? They don't have to go through the courts. And yeah, you can try to fight it back, but good luck. Unless you have Harmeet Dillon as a lawyer to fight for you, you're not getting your account back, right? And that seems to be a big problem that not a lot of people are really addressing, is that a lot of people lost their livelihoods when Twitter was systematically deciding that it was going to deplatform certain people by either shadow banning them or by banning them outright, as what's happened to the Krasensteins, right? Brian Krasenstein, he's in here. His business was effectively impacted by it. He was shut down. He lost probably years of effort. And he's not the only one. I mean, many conservatives were affected by this. They have built their brands from scratch. Carpe Dongtum, for instance, he has or had a business doing art, digital art. Well, he can't do that anymore, not on Twitter, despite having spent, invested months, years of his time building his Twitter account, his following, his brand. It was gone in an instant because Twitter decided to shut it down and there was no recourse. And that's a big fucking problem, right? This is an issue that has never been addressed in the court anywhere at any time ever. And that perhaps is going to be a problem in the future, a much larger problem, when these platforms become the de facto space for having a platform. We see that right now with the disintegration of all these companies. They are unable to function without social media presence. You can't really advertise your business if you're not advertising on social media. If you are banned from all these platforms and you're not allowed to advertise, good luck, right? If you're a political candidate and you're banned from social media platforms, you cannot promote yourself. And how do you win elections if you can't reach people, right? It's the same thing for businesses. How do you build a business if you're banned from these platforms, if you're unpersoned? And the amount of power that these platforms have over us is immense. And for Elon Musk to take over it and issue a sort of free speech policy is amazing. It means that Twitter is going to be like the one place on the internet where you will not be silenced for having a non-mainstream political opinion. I'm not talking about hate speech here. I'm just talking about non-mainstream opinions, and that was what was being silenced. So this is immense, and it's going to have a huge ramifications with different platforms who are going to follow suit, hopefully.
Ian, on that point, this is Grant Cardone. On that point is there's a whole ecosystem out there of people that depend on the internet to take care of their families. I know I'm going to interview people, obviously, that are interesting, that maybe not everyone agrees with. That's what makes them interesting. And when I do that, when the powers to be can control my efforts to build a business and bring an interesting conversation to an audience, like Robert Malone, I brought him on the show, and he told me during the show, he's like, look, if we mention ivermectin prior to the show, he's like, this show will get shut down. And this was a very fair conversation. This was not anti-vax. It wasn't the administration was making the wrong moves. It was nothing. It was nothing challenging at all. And literally 40 minutes into the interview, I get tempted by this challenge. I mentioned ivermectin. 2 minutes later, Instagram shuts my audio down. By the time the broadcast is over, YouTube sends me warning. Facebook shuts our channel down with warnings. And it's like, then the people that follow me see it. The other people in the e-commerce space see it. They start walking on eggshells, and we no longer have free speech just by the threat that can happen to one person. And I'm so excited about it. As soon as Elon grabbed Twitter, I was like, okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to put energy here, because it's not that I just want to make money here. I want to make a difference. And I think a lot of people, the influencers, many of you guys that are creating content every day, you want to make a difference. You don't want to just make money.
This is the key point. This is the key point. Let me put it in very simple terms. We're not on this call, and we weren't on the call with Elon. What was it? How many of us was it on that call? 1 million? I mean, just
100 million, right? 2 million,
100K, whatever it was. We weren't on that call because somebody was debating whether or not somebody was cancelled because they were a pedophile or they were just up to the line of a pedophile. We weren't debating, well, that post was maybe terrorism or it wasn't terrorism. That's not the issue here. The issue is mass censorship for political purposes. That's why we're on this call. It's not about, well, what was that tweet really a crime or not a crime? No, we know that 70% of the people polled said they would have voted differently in 2020 if the Hunter Biden laptop story hadn't been suppressed. I think this is why Elon Musk is doing the drop. So let's focus on the issue. We have political censorship by companies that 96% of the population vote Democrat, and people's free speech and livelihoods are being destroyed. It's that simple.
I think that when Ed and I were banned, I think that what went through our mind wasn't anger at Twitter banning us for breaking terms of service. It was the defamation. But I think it's a bigger issue. I don't think it's an issue of corporations banning people for breaking their terms of service, even though those terms of service can be questioned. Depends where you draw that line. I think it's more of, why is society trusting corporations with all of their data? Why are they building up? Why is society building up these accounts over years, knowing that they can be banned? And I think there's solutions, and I think decentralization is one. Of course, the DeSo blockchain, I think that's something that could have legs. I think that if you have the data that is decentralized and always there, and anybody can plug into that data and create a platform around that data and censor however they wish, but the blockchain itself can't be censored, I think that's actually a solution. And I think it's a solution that both the left, I think I can agree, and I think people on the right can agree that we don't want a corporation controlling that data. Now, Elon Musk, maybe he does have a solution, and I hope he does. I think he's a smart guy. I think that he does have attributes that can push him to think outside the box, and I do think that there's hope there. But
so I just wanted to chime in on that point,
Go on.
because I think what you're saying is, well, I think a lot of what everyone said is very fair. I was skeptical when Musk first acquired it. This whole debacle over actually acquiring it, there was some concerns or considerations about whether or not he was deliberately going to try and run the company into the ground because he paid through the nose for it. But now, as I see what he's doing and the decentralization or desire to sort of tackle the cancer culture that does dominate quite large proportions of the left wing, I think it's a good thing, and we can see what happens. That being said, I do find it's also not just based on social media, although that can heavily influence our behavior, which is that throughout this conversation I'm obviously giving contrarian views on certain things, and it's quite interesting how people who preach the main things which is they don't want censorship, they don't want people, they believe in 100% freedom of speech, and yet I've had several comments from people, perhaps because I've annoyed them, but they've said, you should be silenced. Hang on a second. If you truly believe in freedom of speech, you shouldn't be saying that, because that goes against the very thing that you're pushing for. So I think when we talk about these things, equally, we need to look within ourselves as much as the social media. That being said, the social media, as I said just a minute ago, is heavily influencing of that. So it's a challenging balancing act, and I think if Twitter can become some hub of individualized journalism, independent freedom of speech. I, for one, haven't hosted certain people who've asked me if I would do a space with them on political affairs because I was concerned that I might get, shadow banned because they had a more of a right-wing view. So it happens to all of us, which I think is a concern. But anyway, I appreciate the discussion. It's very good.
A lot of people on the panel too are relatively centrist. I mean, for example, if I see Republicans doing something bad, I'll call that out. If I see Democrats doing something bad, I'll call that out. I don't really necessarily care what the letter next to the name is. I just want to see politicians doing the smart thing and doing the right thing. And it's incredibly scary when there's one-sided control and one-sided party grasp. But one thing I'd argue, if you're a Democrat and you're wondering, should I support this or not? Absolutely yes. Because the worst thing that can possibly happen if you're a Democrat is for Democrats to continue having unchecked social media power to where they're not being told when they have a bad idea. That's a bad idea. They're not being told, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. They're going to go too far to the extreme, and it's going to get to the point where there will be a massive lash against Democrats. So if you're a Democrat, you should want more than anything for people to be allowed to call them out on social media. That will force Democrats to be better, just like it'll force Republicans to be better. It'll make our entire political system significantly improved just to simply have the freedom on major social platforms to call these people out.
Yeah, I think the paradigm has gotten so far out of whack due to an essential ideological monopoly within most of the major big tech platforms that we are seeing kind of a distorted perception of how people are perceiving Elon's acquisition of Twitter. Really, what does Elon propose? An expansion of freedom of speech, mostly of political means.
How dare you?
Yeah, and he's attacked. He's attacked and greatly reduced, and is eliminating all the child exploitation on the platform. I mean, these are like the two major hallmarks that he has brought to the surface, and we've just seen a collective, systematic, hyperbolic freak out over this. They're equating him to some just crazy dictator from the 1940s, and I think just the hyperbolic reaction to those simple things that most everyone should be able to agree on is really testament to how far things got out of whack.
I think the other point, and I can't believe I'm referencing him as a point, but just to show that I do watch and engage with material from all sides of the political spectrum, Paul Joseph Watson, he's a right-wing individual on social media, and he talks about social engineering. And he uses many examples where this is going on, this idea that you're not supposed to speak out against certain things, you're supposed to view and praise certain things. And we can see this even on Netflix with certain bits of the footage that were used to promote the upcoming William and Meghan documentary. They've used footage that wasn't even actually of Meghan, it was of random people, and it's about the sort of manipulation of the mind so that you get a certain stigma of a message. Yeah, nudging. Very good. Yeah, nudging, exactly.
So Fidget, go ahead, bro.
So I'm going to say that my feed leans very left, both because of my belief systems, the people around me, and Web3. Maybe I'm missing something, but I have not seen outrage either about Elon taking over or his intentions for a more democratized and decentralized and fair informational source, or even the fact that the Biden information stuff is coming up, and like, am I missing something?
I guess it depends
yes,
on
you
which
have.
circles you go in, right? Like, I
Headlines
mean, if you're in tech circles, I don't
mainstream
think
media
any
is
liberals are going to be opposed to what Elon is doing, because what he's doing is fundamentally the same as what they're doing, which is democratizing the internet. And I think you'll not find a lot of resistance there. Where I'm looking at is, like, you know, from my sphere of things, and what I'm seeing is that journalists are quite opposed to what he's doing. And I'm talking about progressive journalists, right? I'm not talking about your you know, run-of-the-mill local newspaper journalists or TV journalists. I'm talking about the people who work at MSNBC, the talking heads who drive the narratives every single day, right? People like Ben Collins at MSNBC, people like Brandy Zadrozny at MSNBC, and Taylor Lorenz at Washington Post. These are the people who have significant followings, who are, you know, I would say they have an undue amount of influence over the media landscape, over the narratives, to the point where their own newsrooms are terrified of them. They don't want to get rid of them. They don't want to silence them because they have an undue amount of influence among their followers on Twitter, on social media, who include people who work in the government, right? People who work within school administrations or business administrations and, you know, HR departments. These are the guys that they have the ears of. That's why they're so terrifying to a lot of executives, because they have more influence than the people even running these companies. That's what's terrifying to the people at the companies. So they're the people who are, you know, having this undue amount of influence, who are trying to shut down Elon Musk, who are trying to paint him in the worst light possible. And they have a lot of sycophants who are very much in line with their views, who are promoting what they're promoting.
Some of the things you just said in terms of having like objective, if we're trying to get to objective, balanced, honest conversations, right? And let's identify now that the gap between fact and knowledge is emotion, right? And it's not to attack anybody's effect, right? If we're being objective, which is the only way that this is valuable, right? It means being objective on both sides. So using words like sycophants, using words like they, using the words like everybody, using words like people who own the media, which have
Okay, are you
other
going to get into a
inferences, is not
debate
helpful.
about the language that I'm using?
No, dude, you have 10,000, 12,000, maybe 100,000 people listening to you. You're
I
here the
don't
whole
care.
time.
I don't care.
It is
This
important.
is how I speak, and I think a lot of my listeners are. I would assume that most people here have the intelligence of above a 12th grader. So I'm not concerned with them misinterpreting what I'm saying. When I say everybody,
Ian,
I'm of course
Ian,
hyperbolically.
I wasn't asking you to like. I'm simply stating
not
my
censor
fact.
myself.
No, it's okay. I'm not saying
So
censor yourself.
I can give a take two to your thing as well. That maybe is a lot of the same thoughts, but maybe worded a different way. But obviously, I'm very pro Web3 and crypto, so our feeds probably look very similar. And I pinned a tweet, which was my take as someone in the deep in the crypto space. Is it was less about what was being said, but it was the lack of what was said. So there were so many people who had an issue with the censorship that happens in the financial world and what happened behind closed doors in the 08 crisis, who rallied behind Bitcoin and crypto. And you saw so many people call out the blatant corruption with FTX just within the past few weeks. But a lot of those same people were silent on what happened with the Twitter files. And the reason why I think they should be talking about both of those is because at the end of the day, if you think about it from first principles, the mechanics of both those situations are the exact same. It was basically changing the way in which data on the internet was moved around and having one party or group of people being able to control that. And that goes against the very ethos of everything that's trying to be built by people in Web3.
No, and I agree, right? I think I started my statements earlier by saying that it is not good for any political party to be affecting access to information or dissemination of information or impacts on our government. All I am saying is, in order for these conversations to be incredibly impactful, it requires, I believe, the same objectivity and an adherence to fact on both sides, right? Like I heard Ian a couple times in his opening monologue say that this is related to the Steele dossier that was proven completely false. That is not true.
I wanna quickly go back to a point that we were discussing earlier with Brian when Brian said his story. Christian, welcome to the panel. I want the audience to help us out. So Brian just shared a story, and I brought him on stage to share the story and to balance the stage, in which how he was suspended, but he never disclosed his discussions with Twitter and why he was suspended, because they made him sign an NDA, and how they kind of blatantly said, like, we're not worried about your legal threats, and didn't admit to their mistake in terms of suspending them for the wrong reason. And they kept them suspended. And I think this is pretty serious. They kept them suspended not because they deserve it or they broke the terms of service, but because it helped their agenda. And the assumption that you made, Brian, is that they wanted to balance it out because they were mainly suspending people on the right. They wanted to suspend a couple of influential people on the left, and you were victim to that. I know this is just speculation, Brian. But I want to just ask the audience, if you know anyone else, I'm not asking about small accounts because there's so many small accounts getting suspended. It's too many to count. But if you know any other large accounts that were suspended, we're DMing a few of them now to bring them on stage. I want to see what else has happened in which they were forced to sign an NDA and they couldn't disclose discussions with Twitter. As Brian, Brian, you disclosed the documents 2 days ago because you think under Elon's ownership, they're not going to take any action for you breaching the NDA. Any other similar stories, please do DM us, DM me, and the team will see the message and bring up the speakers. And also, if you're in the audience and you've been through this, do DM me, or if you're a speaker and you want to speak, we might not see your hand up. So DM me and we can bring you up on stage. And before we continue and then just refresh the room, I'll give the mic to Tara to refresh the room before we continue the discussion. I do want to say that the pinned tweet above is for the next space. Let me pin it again, or it's on my profile. So make sure you set your reminders then for the next space, which, as you know, could be about anything, whatever breaking news happens at the time. But Tara, I'll let you take the mic, just refresh the room quickly before we continue the discussion. Tara, are you there?
I believe she's having issues.
Here, you can have the other Tara. While we're waiting for Tara, I actually wanted to share with you all. I don't have a Facebook or Instagram anymore because Facebook, when I came forward again about the way I was censored, my name, Tara Reid, was called election interference. So I couldn't function on Facebook or Instagram. And so and then they made announcements about, which was really, I thought, draconian about Russians, where they would allow hate speech and talk about killing Russians. And I thought that was really, deplorable. And I chose to delete my accounts. But that's kind of the level of how they go after individual citizens. And of course it does affect me. It affects my writing. It affects what I do. So you're right, Mario. It has a very huge impact. And Ian laid out quite aptly how deep that goes.
Ian, I've got a question
Tara,
for
are
you.
you saying, hang on, can we just
Yeah, go ahead.
clarification? Tara, your name became flagged as election interference. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, I was doing a I was doing a book reading for a nonprofit, like to give to charity, and they couldn't get it to go up on Facebook, the live reading, because my name was called election interference, and then later it was called interference with future legislation.
Orwell had no idea. I mean, that is chilling.
Yeah, there was really no remedy. So I never really got an answer or spoke to anyone about it or why they deemed me into election interference. There was no conversation. I've just never been able to resolve that any more than I've been able to resolve why the DOJ took all my social media under sealed warrants.
Thanks for sharing that, Tara. I want to go to a question, Ian, that I think we discussed very briefly, and I've brought this up in other spaces. I think it's very sexy to say, hey, no to censorship, yes to free speech, and I think we all support that thesis. But I think we also agree that there is a place for censorship. Some things should be censored.
There are certain boundaries, yes. Certain things are legal doesn't mean we want them on our spaces. Now, before anybody has a knee-jerk reaction, I am, of course, referring to virtual child pornography, as we've seen the Balenciaga stuff, right? Now, the Supreme Court ruled in 2002 that virtual child pornography is legal. Now, it doesn't mean it's legal in Europe.
What do you mean virtual? So what's virtual child pornography?
Simulated child pornography. It could mean anything from a simulated sex scene, like a real-life one, or a drawn scene, like illustrations, CGI, cartoons, things like that.
Hold on, cartoons. Sorry, did you just say cartoons or CGI of people under the age of 18 that look like 6-year-olds?
That is correct. Yeah, that is illegal in most countries. In Japan, it's illegal. It is illegal in Europe. It is illegal in Russia. It is illegal in Asia. But it's perfectly legal in the United States. Now, it's not legal in Canada. Keep that in mind. Okay,
but what's the thought process? Like, how is that legal? What am I missing?
Well, the argument with the Supreme Court, and I'm just gonna, I'm just distilling it here. I'm sure people can correct me if they want to go through the actual details. But the idea is that people should have the free speech to basically have sexual fantasies about kids without going to jail for it, right? And that they have the right to post such material, whether it's illustrated or written, in the on the internet or anywhere else, like in a book, for instance. They're allowed to do
the indirect harm didn't outweigh the value of free speech.
Correct. That's what they
allowed.
argue. Yeah, and now most people will disagree with this. I will personally disagree with this. My own country bans this. I think many countries do, as I've said. But the U.S. Supreme Court says it's legal, that it's allowed. Now, people who like to call themselves MAPs, whom we refer to them as pedophiles because they are pedophiles, would argue that it's legal, so they should be allowed to have a platform on this space. And previously, under the previous administration, run by Yoel Roth, they allowed such things. You could post such things without getting banned. And now if somebody called for you to be put in a wood chipper, they would ban you for it. They would literally ban anybody saying wood chipper, right? This is how Twitter used to be run. Now, Elon Musk clearly does not agree with this decision, and he has been cracking down on this sort of quote-unquote free speech. Now, the pedophiles are most affected by this, and anyone who sympathizes with pedophiles is affected by it, but nobody else is. So there are certain boundaries to what is allowed on this platform versus what is allowed in real life. Now, nobody's saying that these people should be thrown in jail for their sick beliefs as long as they don't act on it. No one's saying that. Twitter is not real life. But it doesn't mean that Twitter should allow such things. You can be a free speech absolutist and allow such things, to be permissive of such things, and ignore the harm that it causes to actual children or how it enables actual pedophiles. But it doesn't mean that I have to agree with it, or that anybody here has to agree with it, or that Elon even has to agree with it, because there are certain boundaries that I don't think should be crossed. We need to have a certain sense of morality and ethics, and sometimes the courts get things wrong. That's just how it is.
But then the question is who. Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, I absolutely don't agree with that content, but I want to say that the problem is that you're using your personal beliefs to say that something that is legal shouldn't be on Twitter. Couldn't I
Well, the
say that I
judges
think that?
also, like I said, the laws change, right? The laws can change. This is
Right,
like
but
Roe versus
like,
Wade
I don't
changed
want to
recently.
see. I don't want to see swastikas on Twitter. I don't want to see the N word being used nonstop on Twitter. Does that mean that that should be banned? It's like why are you going to be the judge? And I want to repeat.
Well, I'll
I
tell
don't
you who's going to
agree
be
with
the
that
judge.
content.
It's Elon Musk. He paid $44 billion to be the judge. So it's
Yeah,
just all
but
ultimately.
this whole argument is that Elon Musk should only ban content that is illegal. Why is he going to be the
I'm
judge
not
and
making that
jury in this?
argument. I don't know anyone who's seriously making that argument, because if that were true, then he would permit every single thing. For instance, harassing people is not technically illegal unless you actually send them violent death threats, in which case it is not protected speech. But again, we don't allow it because you don't want Twitter to turn into a free-for-all hellscape, right? He has stated this repeatedly, that he does not want Twitter to be a free-for-all hellscape. So certain things, whether it's legal or not, will be banned because it's not good for the health of this platform. Now, you can say that's a slippery slope. Maybe under the previous administration it was, because for them, even joking about misgendering somebody, not actually even misgendering somebody, but joking about it, could get you banned. That was the previous administration. We don't have that to worry about anymore, because the platform that's currently being run is being, operated on more something that's closer to the First Amendment. It's not completely the First Amendment, but you should not make perfect the enemy of good. That's just not how things work. We don't live in a perfect world where everything is binary. So
but that's the problem, is that
judgments.
the problem is that you're drawing a line there based on your views, whereas
Yes, as we all do. As we all do. As we
So
wake
I
up
mean,
every
how is
single
that
day,
any
we
different
draw
than
lines.
Twitter deciding to ban content for misinformation or ban content because this person said something really disgusting towards another person? Why are you drawing the line here, but you don't think other people should be able to draw the line on
Well,
other
there's
sides?
a difference between political speech and creepy speech, right? Being a fucking creep online, nobody wants to see that.
Oh, I agree. I don't either. But I'm just saying that you're saying it for some content, but you're not saying it for
Yeah,
content
because I don't
that
agree
you disagree
with
with.
silencing political speech,
Yeah,
especially
but
when it affects 60% of the country.
But you agree that speech should be censored.
I mean, even you agree that it shouldn't be allowed, right? You agree that it shouldn't be allowed. So why are you playing devil's advocate?
But I also believe that a lot of other stuff shouldn't be allowed too. You're just saying only this shouldn't be allowed, even though it's legal. So why just that one thing? Why are you picking and choosing? Is that really a fair way to go about it? I believe that creepy stuff shouldn't be there. I also believe that some type of speech, the N-word in particular, swastikas, I don't think that should be allowed. I think that you're sort of picking and choosing what you want or what you think should be allowed.
You'd be
based on your
surprised
own
at how much I
personal
agree
views.
with you on certain things not being allowed. If you are inciting violence, I don't think that should be allowed. I think Elon agrees that incitement to violence is wrong for the platform, even if it might be legal in real life in certain cases. On Twitter, it's not. So I don't think we're
But Ian,
necessarily disagreeing with it.
is the threshold good for the platform or good for humanity? Because it
Good for
brings me
humanity,
back to what I think.
would say is the threshold. Yeah, good for
I
humanity.
think it brings me back.
The way that
I
Elon
think it
Musk
brings me
views
back.
things, I mean, I can't speak for him, but it seems
Okay.
that is how he views the platform's rules as well. I mean, if you suppress political speech, is that good for humanity? No, it's not. But
Okay,
suppressing pedophile speech.
Mario, can I ask you a question, Mario?
Okay, fine enough.
Yeah, sure, Sebastian.
So your guys are reaching out to me, and you want to get other speakers on or invite people who've been banned. Can you tell me, while we're waiting for the next data dump, what you would like the purpose, and then the other hosts, Tara and everybody else, the purpose of this discussion to be? Because right now it's kind of random. It's kind of random, brain farts on the various issues related.
I agree, Sebastian.
Thank you to freedom of speech. And I'll just reiterate one thing. Just let this sink in. a very senior person from the 7th floor of the most powerful intelligence and law enforcement arm in the world, went from that agency straight to the most important news source on social media and became their deputy vice counsel. That individual filtered and scrubbed information that was meant for public disclosure, ordered by the new CEO. Was that person still working for the FBI? Was he being back channeled in order to do what he was doing for Biden, for the DOJ, for the FBI? As far as I'm concerned, and I get it, I'm a national security wonk, I've worked in the Trump White House. This is the only thing we should be talking about. Because if there is that level of utter real collusion between the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world and Twitter, then I think we should be talking about that really. But
So your
you
concern,
tell us.
your concern would be. I agree with you, Sebastian, as well. So your concern would be how deep does this go, and what other platforms have the same issue?
Does anybody really think that James Baker wasn't sent to Twitter? Does anybody really think that?
I mean, I would have to see evidence of it. Do you think that?
No, I'm not talking about.
You can allude to
I
it.
live in the real world, but does
Yeah, the
anybody
real
think
world, we're fact
does anybody really think he was censoring and scrubbing that information because he wanted to? Because only James Baker wanted to? Does anybody
No,
think that passes?
I think he did the same thing that every person that works at the SEC works at the SEC for, so they can go out into the corporate world and get a great job helping companies.
There was the same, yeah. There was the same story today about an SEC, someone from the SEC and Milk Road were covering it, where she just bought a $50 million home, and because she got like $80-90 million worth of shares in Coinbase just by sitting on their board. And then everyone just connected the dots. It was on the My First Million podcast. Everyone connected the dots. They're like, hey, SEC, Coinbase got paid a shit ton, probably doesn't deserve it unless she's helping them with X, Y, Z. I think you're connecting those same dots, Sebastian.
I agree, and I think, Sebastian, to your point, what should the other topic be? I think it should be two things. It should be one, in the most plain, non-esoteric language possible. We should be breaking down what happened here, and I appreciate your interjections, because I think you've done a really good job of bringing this down to brass tacks of what happens and how the corruption was brought in. And then I think the second piece is, how do you stop it from happening again? Because if this happened once, and if it got provably shown that it's happened once, that means it probably happened in the past, and it will probably happen in the future.
Happening. It's probably happening right now. So
in this very moment, yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear here. I like everybody else, I'm a bit of a geek. I spend far too much time on social media. This is the only third space I've ever done in my life. I'm 52 years old, okay? But I think I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't know how many people we've got on this call. Our time is precious.
I agree. We should not be talking about pedophiles.
Right. The freedoms that we enjoy are under assault. Just take the politics out of it. They're under assault by people who think they have the right to decide what we are allowed to read when a CEO wants to share information of public interest. So I think these discussions are the new media. These are the new public square. But I want us to have purpose. And I'm very grateful for you allowing me to talk to Elon last, I'm blown away. What was that, 2 days ago, 3 days ago? But let's really focus ourselves in this discussion. That's my suggestion.
Hey, Sebastian, do you mind if I ask you a quick question?
Of course, go ahead.
So in 2017, President Trump blocked Ed and I from reading his tweets and replying to his tweets. You can agree with his actions. You don't have to. But in 2018, we filed a lawsuit with the Knight Institute asking the federal courts to force Trump to unblock us and allow us to be able to read and reply to his tweets, just like every other American citizen. And the courts determined that Trump actually abridged our First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I know the whole story. You don't have to tell the story. What's the question?
The question is, do you think that was right, that he was able to block us? Because that was actually a First Amendment violation, where all this Twitter stuff.
Right. Let me tell you. So I think, because I had an official account and I had a personal account. My opinion is the following. If you're a public servant, even if you're an elected public servant, your official account should be readable by anybody in the world. I think you also have the right to have a personal non-government account, and you can do whatever you like with that. So, the POTUS 45 account should not be able to block anybody. That's my personal opinion.
But I think you highlight the most important thing here that's not being talked about is the legal difference between public and private entities.
Yes.
Twitter has the right to do whatever they want that doesn't violate the Constitution, right? You have a right to use the platform or not.
And that's gets to the how you fix this, though, because to be honest with you, notice how all of this debate right now is around Twitter or Facebook. Notice how no one's complaining about the email system, right? And why is that? That's because email is built as an open protocol. No one owns the email protocol. Okay, you can build an email client on top of it, like Gmail, but that domain register is open, which means that you can't,
Alex,
the government can't pick up the phone.
Mario told me not to talk about crypto or DAOs.
No,
or
this isn't even crypto.
decentralization,
Email does not use crypto. And to give you a non-crypto example of this, Jack Dorsey has been funding a project called @Protocol. And regardless of what you think of Jack Dorsey, okay, I promise you, has probably some level of guilt for how things played out. Okay, I don't think human beings want to be caught in these types of situations, right? He started building something as a social media app, and next thing you know, he owns one of the most powerful social media platforms on the planet. And that's why the @Protocol has nothing to do. It's not a blockchain. It's not crypto. Okay,
No,
it just goes to show that
I meant
becoming a
autonomy.
protocol.
I just meant autonomy, censorless autonomy.
I don't really know what you're saying, to be honest, because I'm just trying to talk in like really specific terms, which is Twitter is a platform. It's
So
a
here's the
privately
thing.
owned social media
Here's the
platform.
thing.
Not a
The
protocol.
Twitter is the de facto common carrier right now. That's the issue, right? It is a privately owned company, yes, but it does not enjoy the same. I mean, it does not offer the same protections as a common carrier, which would be emails, telephone lines, and so on. For instance, if you are, it doesn't matter who you are, right? A telephone company can't decide to suspend your service because they don't like your political leanings. That just doesn't happen. It's illegal for them to do so. Twitter's not the same. It can do that, right? It's because it's private. Even Facebook can do that. Any company can really do that, except for your phone company. So that's the difference. Now, Twitter should be adhering very closely to the common carrier law. Not that it should 100%, because it is a very different kind of medium. It's a very public space compared to a phone line, which is just one-on-one. But it should be in its own best interest, and I think every single social media company should be in acting in the interest of themselves to not get under the regulation of this. Because what happens is, if they go too far by censoring people, eventually a government is going to come into power, let's just say the Republicans do, completely, and decide, hey, we're going to make all social media platforms common carriers, and now you can't ban anybody at all. Well, they turn into free-for-all hellscapes, first of all. That's what's going to happen. They will probably shut down from being fucking terrible to be on. So I think these companies need to start thinking about what's for the common good, what works out for them, as well as, like, put that above ideology, right? So Elon Musk's approach to making sure that Twitter does not turn into a free-for-all hellscape, but at the same time offering people the freedom to express their political views, that is, I think, in my opinion, and I don't think I have a bad opinion here, that's the right move. Because if you go too far, as Twitter once did, it will come under the control of the government. It will be subject to regulation. Section 230 will be no more, and it will no longer enjoy the freedoms it once had. It will be regulated. That's not good for Twitter. That's not good for anybody, because it means that the government gets to control it. But it also means that Twitter just turns into hell, because it means anybody can post anything they want as long as it's legal. And who the hell wants to operate a platform like that? We might as well just shut down.
But
right?
you would have separation, though. Like Ian, I think you hit like a lot of nails on the head there, because I think honestly, if people get the opportunity to talk to Elon on Spaces again, I think the thing we should be asking him is not necessarily about specific instances, but how can he make, with his power, how can he turn these social media platforms, starting with Twitter, to look more like email and to look more like phone than not? And, to answer your question of what would happen if social media did go in that direction of email and phones, well, what would happen is you would actually see competition back at the client level. Anyone could build a client. So if you wanted to have a client like Twitter that doesn't want to have that type of stuff, people would be willing to, stay on the platform. But then if you wanted someone that wanted to have more open things, and we see this with the internet, like this is how the entire internet has been built. And I think, unfortunately, the vast majority of people never get the opportunity to learn the technical intricacies of literally how free and open the internet is. Like, there's a reason you can go on a browser and go to a platform like Facebook or to like a library website that has one set of rules, and then you can go to a porn site which has a completely different set of rules. And that's what happens with the internet, is that it was built on clear and open protocols. So I think social media was not built on those clear and open protocols, and as a result, you have platform capture, right? Which means that you have these single platforms are put in an impossible decision, which is that they're forced to make decisions for the entire internet, and that's not how any organization is meant to be built, in my opinion.
There have been efforts to standardize these protocols. One of them is the code of conduct. I'm not saying I agree with it. It's actually really bad, because the code of conduct is essentially a very woke article that was put together by Corleen Ada Emke, who is an activist, used to work at GitHub, right? And GitHub is owned by Microsoft. That set of protocols has been implemented throughout Silicon Valley. Many companies now adhere to it, and they are essentially extremely, extremely woke. Now, if you don't understand what wokeness is, I'm referring, of course, to the progressive ideology that encompasses CRT, gender ideology, and so on and so forth. And that is what they go by. That is the standard that they try to adhere to. And Reddit, being one of the largest websites on the internet, and was at one point the #1 most read site on the internet prior to being basically taken over by a woke mafia that now controls it in moderating positions, as well as the administration. Previously, it was just moderating positions. Now they actually work at Reddit. Well, they've essentially decided what is allowed on the internet, right? And Twitter is completely opposite to it now, but previously it was along those lines. So that's kind of scary when you have a single dominant ideology that rules over everything on the internet, and they have tried multiple times to even institute themselves or integrate themselves into organizations like Slack. They wanted to ban people whose politics they disagreed with, like ban users from using certain features on Slack. Those people got fired, by the way, thankfully.
I'm just going to jump in quickly. So Tara messaged me just a few minutes ago. She said, shit. So she said, you can see her tweet. I cannot moderate or speak, so she can't speak or moderate right now. She sent me a screenshot. I was kicked right after tweeting about the FBI. Now, correlation, causation, we have no ID. So I've tried just now. Yeah, it's probably a bug as well, but it's just pretty cool. So I've tweeted about the FBI as well just now. I did a questionnaire. So for the audience, the question is going by what...
all right, guys, this was a very nice space. Nice to meet you all.
How are you
speaking? You're awake.
He's in the middle of the forest. He's sending me pictures. Actually, tweeted pictures. He's in the middle of nowhere. He's lost.
Are you on
I have a suggestion. Everyone who is on the panel, take a photo of where you are right now, so that the listeners can have a little bit of fun on the side.
No, I can't do that, Kim. I'll give away my FBI position.
I don't want to dox myself.
I did that, Kim. So I did that twice. I did that back in Clubhouse, and I did it in a Twitter space a couple of months ago. I asked everybody to take a selfie where they are and then send it to your DM to me and any other speaker that wants it. And then speakers will put their hand up if they want to get the selfie. And we had hundreds of people send selfies. Some of them were a bit weird. So what we can do now, what do you think, Kim? Should we do it again, or should we ask them to tweet it?
Yeah, everyone should just tweet a picture of where they are right now. And so the whole audience can just click through every speaker. And then, by the way, we're getting a little bit of an engagement on Twitter. And then if you want, you can follow us and be like, whoa. Awesome.
Whoa, psychedelic, man.
So give it a try, guys. You can tag any speaker you like, and I'm going to go through the notifications to see all the selfies. It's actually fascinating. What you could do as well is you could
send it to Mario. Don't send it to
me.
My client is having issues.
So what my team would kill me if I just flood the inbox with more selfies again. But I'm thinking what they tweet it, and then we can put a hashtag so everyone can see the hashtag. So you put hashtag. What do you think, Ian? What hashtag can we put in? so someone could search it.
Where are you really? Or who
Where
are
are you really? Sounds pretty good. Yeah.
Where are you really?
Where are you really? So yeah,
Yep.
where are you really? So just do that, everyone. Just post a selfie. You can tag any of our speakers and put the hashtag where are you really, and then everyone can check those hashtags. In the meantime, I'm looking at the votes about the question. So did James back? But obviously everyone's speculating now. But did he act alone or on behalf of the FBI? So you got 3%. Oh shit, 3% said alone. You guys are crazy. I thought it was gonna be more split. 20% said no clue. Fair. And then 77% speculate there's on behalf of the FBI. What do you think, Ian? Is too far-fetched to start making such
I don't
assumptions?
think it's far-fetched. I think it's a reasonable proposition. It's a reasonable, idea. I mean, judging from what Sepp Gorka said, I think he's right. I think he's spot on when he pointed out that this is a big deal. A lot of people are not really thinking about it, right? It's like, oh yeah, just some guy who used to work for the FBI. No. He's the guy who was in charge of the Steele dossier. He let that.
Can you tell us again, for anyone that doesn't know about those dossier that drop of dossiers and how that related to Trump?
Let's talk about the dossier.
All right, let's talk about dossier. So a few years ago, I forget how many years ago, 2016, 2017, something like that, a dossier came out from a guy named Steele. I forget his first name. He was a British spy working freelance, and supposedly he, went to Russia and he found out things about Trump. Like the idea was that Trump had some compromat on him, or rather the Russians had compromat or compromising material. They like to use words like Russian words, just to throw them in there to make it sound all 1960s spy nonsense. So the idea was that Putin had a bunch of files on Donald Trump, like blackmail stuff, and that he was basically under the thumb of the Russians. This is complete nonsense. This is complete fabrication, a fiction that was manufactured.
No. What they proved, please, you have an audience. What they proved is that he was basically hired or told to do it for purposes. That does not discredit the facts of the dossier or the allegations.
Has no facts in it. The dossier has no facts in it.
Just quickly, guys, I want you, Ian, Fidgetal, and before you continue, I want everybody to do this now. Go hashtag where are you really, and I promise you it's worth it. Just do it now, and then look at the selfies. The reason
I'm happy with that hashtag. I'm just gonna say, well, that's my first viral hashtag. I'm more chuffed with that.
Yeah, so go hashtag where are you really, everyone in the audience. It's such a, when I did it in Clubhouse, it's very, at least I was emotional and other speakers were, because it just makes you realize that all these thousands of people that listen to us in every show, they're people like, look at this person folding clothes in the bedroom, another one sitting in the gym, not actually on a run. Look at this guy, chiseled as hell. For the first time I'm not cursing. This guy is sitting in it like, yeah, the first time I don't curse intentionally. So you got all these people. Look at this. It's crazy. Look at this lady with bunny.
Crazy, right?
Wolf
Yeah,
Club
people
77
all
with
over the
bunny ears. Check it out, everyone. I think it's really worth it. Anyway, I'll geek over that. But back to the dossier. Sorry, Ian. I'll let you respond to Fidgetal.
Yeah. So yeah. I forget who the hell was dismissing what I was saying.
Fidgetal.
Yeah, he's wrong. Yeah, the dossier was completely discredited because it manufactured whole cloth. There's no supporting evidence whatsoever. And so the Clinton administration, not administration, but the Clinton campaign, which includes Ned Price put out a little statement on behalf of Hillary Clinton, telling people to go check this out. Like, oh, take a look at this little dossier just dropped on our friend Donald Trump, and you guys should totally check this out. It's totally concerning, you guys. Now, it turns out later on that the document was manufactured to discredit Donald Trump, to make him look bad. And obviously it was fake. It was false. 100% nonsense.
Ian, how is it obviously false?
Well,
your mic, Fidgetal, your mic is...
you're speaking over me.
Yeah, sorry, Fidgetal, I've just muted you. You've got a lot of echo. Anyone speaking can hear echo, and we can barely hear you. So I'll let you fix your mic, man, and then jump in again.
Well, the watch...
Yeah, to be fair, dossier, it wasn't corroborated. There were things in there that have been proven to be false, but the entire dossier had not been proven false. The Hillary Clinton campaign did not create the dossier. They didn't pay for the dossier. They worked with somebody who was connected to the individual who did pay for the dossier.
Okay, yeah, I think that's an important clarification. Yeah, they basically piggybacked off of this effort to discredit Donald Trump. That's what they did, and I mean, they knew it was false, right? They knew it was created, and that's where the collusion lies. So they were like a degree of separation away from the creation of the dossier, but they knew who made it. They knew it was false. They knew it was provably false, that, or at least none of it was, you could corroborate any of the information in there. So yeah, maybe it's got one piece of information in there that's true. The sun rises in the east. Wow, doesn't mean any of it. The rest of it's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think BuzzFeed broke that story too, and initially,
It was BuzzFeed that broke that story, yeah, and
Yeah.
they capitalized on the pee tape part, right? The idea was that he had hired a bunch of prostitutes to pee on him, which is there's no evidence that any of this was true, and it turns out later on that Hunter Biden was, soliciting prostitutes. Wow, imagine that. So
Remember the days when
they would just
BuzzFeed
took
said
one story to
legitimately-
another.
Yeah, remember the
But
days.
president too, though, wasn't Trump doing the same thing?
So Sebastian, you're back on stage. Sebastian, or you dropped off earlier? Sebastian?
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see him.
I see him.
No, he just dropped out. Oh yeah, he's there.
He's,
Sebastian, can you hear me? Oh, perfect. I think
He's connecting.
yeah, he
Well,
can hear us again now. I know that Phenomenology wants to speak. Yeah, go ahead, Sebastian. So we did a poll. Not sure if you saw the poll, but so 77% last I looked voted. So I asked people, did James Baker act alone or on behalf of the FBI when he blocked the Twitter files to drop? 3.2% said alone. 15% said no clue. 81%, whoever's eating is very loud. I'm not sure who that is. I'll just let you mute. Who's the hell's eating? Let me mute everyone. Okay, so and then only 81% said it's on behalf of the FBI. So on that point, before we go to Harrison and Barry, on that point, what does that mean if he was acting on behalf of the FBI? What's your take on that, Sebastian? I'm not sure what's happening on Sebastian's end. I'll let him fix his mic. I'll just DM him now. I'll go with.
I don't think he's actually here, Mary. I think it's that ghost thing where they look like they're speaking.
No. He's definitely
He's there.
there. Oh, he just dropped out. He just dropped out now. I'll go to Aisha, Harrison, and Barry. Aisha, do you want to go first? Aisha, sorry.
Yeah, sure. So, and I think, well, we should wait for Sebastian to come back, but it kind of goes back to what he was saying about, that's the fundamental problem. It's one thing if, internally things were pushed down, but if a government or the FBI cannot be, directing or directive on anything, for Twitter to be pushing things down or suppressing them, of course. And, beyond just this one particular issue that we're talking about, where are the other cracks? I think that's what Elon is going to have to figure out. That's extremely problematic.
Okay, guys, I'm back on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Did you hear my question?
I didn't, but I got so much to say. Tell me your question.
No, I'll let you go on first. I'll ask it afterwards.
So, guys, and I will not brook anybody saying what I'm about to say is incorrect, okay? I still have my TS clearances. I'm not going to say anything anything classified on here, but I'm going to tell you everything that you can verify within 30 minutes if you wish to verify. The Steele dossier was utterly fabricated. You cannot, of course, prove a negative, so don't say you blah blah blah. Okay, everything in the Steele dossier about the Moscow hotel, the Alpha Bank, is a lie. It was compiled by somebody called Christopher Steele, former MI6 agent in Moscow, who was paid this is irrefutable, look it up, paid $12 million by the Clinton campaign. Where did he source the information? He sourced the information from Ivan Danchenko, who is a Russian national who was working at the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C., an individual who was flagged 7 years ago as a Russian intelligence asset. That was the source of the information. Not only is he a Russian intelligence asset, it was demonstrated under oath in a court in Virginia 2 months ago that this individual had been identified as not only untrustworthy. When they realized that this was a manufactured dossier, these are the things we should be talking about. The FBI offered Christopher Steele $1 million if he could verify anything in the dossier he had provided to the Hillary campaign and to the Daily Beast. He refused to take the $1 million. This is on court record in Alexandria, Virginia, because he couldn't verify it. The P dossier, Alpha Bank, Donald Trump is a Russian asset, were all lies. This is what you need to know about the Steele dossier. The key individual in the Steele dossier investigation that was initiated prior to the election is James Baker, who just happened to slide into the deputy chief counsel of Twitter, and who was fired today by Elon Musk. These are the real things we need to be talking about. But what was your question, Mario?
Yeah, very, very important point this, Sebastian. And also I want to add to that the source of Christopher Steele, after that I found out that it's not credible, they put him in a thing like a witness protection.
Yes, they made him a CI. They made him a confidential informant, which meant his relationship to the U.S. government instantly became classified, and nobody could ask questions and nobody could subpoena him. Massively important fact.
And that is the real fraud here. The FBI knew this guy was a liar. It was fabricated, and then in order to cover it up, they put him under a seal of secrecy, and that is what the Steele dossier is. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah, you got it.
Did you have any sourcing saying that is showing that the Clinton campaign paid him $12 million?
Yeah.
I don't see anything
Yeah,
like
I'll go to my
Shoot me a
Twitter.
link.
Go to my Twitter, and I'll
Sure.
post it in the next 5 minutes. Stand by.
Okay.
Go ahead, Harrison, and phenomenology. I'm trying to bring up. So Fidgetal's got a couple of points to make on this, Sebastian. But while bringing him up, I'll give Harrison and Barry the mic. Go ahead.
So this whole James Baker situation seems like one of those classic cases of government officials bouncing back to private industry. We see it in the military-industrial complex all the time, but still serving out their goals of the party that they were serving prior to the organization. Where my guess is he was going to do a few years at Twitter, get Twitter all in line with kind of what he was seeing, and all of a sudden Elon Musk takes over and kind of throws a wrench in his plan, because he was basically trying to get Twitter under his thumb until he could get his next job in some government administration. Kind of that classic case of just bouncing back and forth that we see too often in Washington.
It's posted at the top of my Twitter feed, Seb Gorka. It's a CNN story confirming that the law company Perkins Coie handled the $12 million for Clinton to pay for Christopher Steele. It's at the top of my Twitter feed.
I've had people ask me to post a photo of where I am, but considering I'm in DC, that might not help my independence argument.
So I'll let before I give the mic to Fidgetal. Barry, go ahead, and I've got a question for you after that, Sebastian. But Barry, go ahead.
Thanks, I appreciate the mic. I think that in light of Matt Taibbi's first drop, many of us were, or many people were questioning, okay, he didn't see any direct proof of government involvement. But I would ask everyone to turn their attention in the next coming weeks of the case that's happening right now by the Attorney General of Missouri, Eric Schmidt. The case is called Biden versus Missouri, or Missouri versus Biden, I'm sorry. And under deposition, the lead FBI agent, Elvis Chan, just said under oath that as many as 8 FBI agents were meeting weekly at Twitter and at Facebook leading up to the election. And so I can post in the Nest, he's got all the court documents there. So I think that is really important information to corroborate, because that shows some documents that were not part of the drop. And also, if you look at the work of some other, like Miranda Devine and Molly Katzenberg, through different court cases and FOIA, they have some documents that also have not been dropped, because I know there's thousands and thousands, and it might take a while for us to get some of those. And then thirdly, on the same day that Matt Taibbi dropped the first drop, here where I am in Arizona, separate from Matt's work, we found that Secretary of State here in Arizona, Katie Hobbs, had emailed CISA.gov and Twitter and asked them to delete tweets that would make people feel uncomfortable or doubting the election. Interestingly, also, who worked in her office was Adrian Fontes, who was part of Fast and Furious. He represented the narco gun runners. So it's just really interesting to see how this all ties together. So it definitely follow Attorney General Eric Schmidt, journalist Miranda Devine, and Molly Katzenberg to see how these all kind of tie together.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Sebastian for posting that link. I just want to clarify, the Clinton campaign did not pay Steele personally $12 million.
Yeah, of course
An
they
attorney
did.
for
They
Clinton,
a
an
lawyer,
attorney
that's
for
how
the
they do
Clinton
it.
campaign.
Right.
The
Of
attorney
course.
for Clinton campaign paid Fusion GPS, and Fusion GPS, they had one person, which was Christopher Steele, working for them to get information for their clients. So yeah, it's partially accurate.
No, because David Kramer went to London for one day. Who
Hang on.
McCain sent
Dude, hang
Kramer.
on. Dude, did you really just say partially accurate? Did you seriously on this call say
No,
partially?
you said that.
No. Hang on. The campaigns don't campaigns don't give suitcases of $12 million to former MI6 agents. You do know that, right? They don't actually do that. They hire lawyers as middlemen. That's why lawyers are the richest people in DC. So just because I didn't say the lawyers for the Hillary Clinton campaign, don't say partially, okay? Because that's bullshit.
I just want to clarify that the Clinton
It's an
campaign
unnecessary
did not
clarification. Like, if I tell a lawyer to do something, it's me who's telling them to do something.
Well,
But they're not acting off their own accord.
Wait a minute. There's several different things here. A lawyer for the campaign paid Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS was a research company, and one of the individuals that they sent money to was Christopher Steele. The Clinton campaign did not send $12 million to
We know
Christopher
this, but
Steele.
it's a degree of separation.
I was just clarifying.
Have you ever watched
comment.
Better
That's
Call
it.
Saul or
I was
Breaking
just
Bad?
but there is no
It's some
evidence
very
of $12
basic things.
million.
You get your lawyer to do bad things for you. That's just
let
how
me
it is. To
No,
keep
I
your hands
don't
clean.
disagree there. I don't disagree there.
Yeah,
but
so
there
why are
was
you
not
pointing
a
this out?
$12 million.
It's like saying, well, Clinton didn't personally ship
Okay,
her
never mind. I won't get my point through.
didn't give Christopher Steele the money personally, so she didn't do it. It's like, come on, use your brain.
Yeah. Let me just clarify what I'm saying. So $12 million was not sent to Christopher Steele. Funds were sent to Fusion GPS, not $12 million, and a portion was sent to Christopher Steele for research. Just want to clarify. I'm not saying that Sebastian's inaccurate, but there was the wording that he used was not accurate.
Okay. Do you know who the husband of that woman at Fusion GPS was? Do you even know the details? Do you know who Bruce Orr is? So Nellie Orr was the person at Fusion GPS. Nellie Orr was their Russian linguist. Do you know that Nellie Orr's husband is Bruce Orr, senior FBI lawyer?
I do know that. Yes, I do know that.
So you can go down this avenue, but I will respond every time and bring it back to the real story. Okay?
No, I'm just clarifying the wording you used was not accurate. The amount of money and
I think go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, I think we got the clarification, Brian, and I think the audience got both points. So Sebastian, the point that you were making, they were just about to make again, and I know Fidget was trying to jump in, but go ahead.
No. I wanted to hear your question, Mara. You said you had a question.
Oh, so the question, and then Fidget, I'll give you the mic afterwards. But the question is, considering everything that you've just discussed and speculating that the gentleman acted on behalf of the based on the instructions from the FBI, which again, we don't know this for a fact, but there's good enough reasons to make that assumption. What does that mean? Like, how serious is this, and how big is the problem in your opinion?
I'll tell you right now how big the problem is. I've discussed this in public, so I'm allowed to do so. And I'll probably have to jump after this because it's 3 a.m. where I am. I'm in the Middle East right now. So I was in the White House as Deputy Assistant to the President for Strategy, which is a pretty high-ranking position. I was given a classified job to do, which required me to build a team. And I've trained a lot of people across the USG, hundreds and hundreds of people, and I wanted to detail 4 individuals to the White House for 2 years, because the White House doesn't have a staff. You detail people over to you. I had 3 students who were special agents of the FBI and a girl who was at the CIA who could help me with this project. I went to White House HR, second week of the administration, to say I want these people detailed to me as White House staff for 2 years. HR said, no problem. It takes about 10 days. All we have to do is we have to move their clearances from scattered castles over to the White House. We just have to move the clearances. 6 months later, none of the individuals were working for me in the White House. The 3 FBI guys had been put on punishment details, and a very senior FBI guy who was visiting my wife in the administration for an official business, she was a political appointee at DHS,
So
peeled
like you
off
just
his...
Sebastian, if you can just get the mic a tiny bit closer to your mouth, we can understand what you're saying. It could, if you can make it a bit clearer, please. Thanks.
Can you hear me better now?
Oh, it's perfect. Wow, wow, yeah, much better. Yeah.
So I requested 4 people to be detailed to me in the White House. Should have taken 10 days to transfer their clearances and move them to me physically. 6 months later, none of them had arrived. Every 2 weeks, I was asking, where are my people? Senior FBI agent comes to the Eisenhower building of the White House to meet with my wife, who's a DHS presidential appointee. After the meeting, he peels off and finds my office. And he says, Seb, I got to tell you something. I just want you to know. You will never, ever receive those 3 individuals that you detailed as deputy assistant to the president. And this is a direct quote, guys. You will never receive them because the 7th floor of the Hoover building, which is director, deputy director, looks at this White House as, quote, the enemy. That will give you perspective, everybody on this call, because the FBI is part of the executive. Doesn't work for Congress, doesn't work for the Senate, doesn't work for the Supreme Court. They work for the person elected as the chief law enforcement officer in America, who is the incumbent president. And the bureaucrats on the 7th floor of the Hoover building deemed the man elected by 64 million Americans to be the enemy. That is why you have Steele dossier. That is why you have Mueller probe. That is why you have impeachment 1, impeachment 2, the $1 million bounty given to Christopher Steele to verify his unverifiable dossier. And that is why you have everything that is happening right now at Twitter. I guarantee you, I'm going to wait for the empirical evidence, but I guarantee you that James Baker was placed at Twitter. And what he did was done on somebody else's orders. He didn't just decide to sanitize the first drop before Matt could actually look at those documents. So, these are the issues we should talk about, because I don't care who you vote for. But the fact the FBI...
I want to talk about it, Sebastian, if I may. I have a direct question to you. You were an advisor to the president. It became pretty obvious early on that there was all kinds of collusion to derail his presidency. How couldn't you help him as an advisor right next to him, pointing out these things, warning him and protecting him? He's made some stupid appointments. He literally was kicked in the knees at every corner to try and stop him from executing his plans. And you were right there. Like, why couldn't you stop it?
Very, very good question. So I gave a long interview to PBS on this, and the description I gave for what we were doing, just to understand the challenge involved, is I called it. Now, you don't have to believe me, but I have no reason to lie.
The mic, the mic again. Sorry,
Sebastian. Can you hear me? Sorry. Can you hear me? Is that good? Can you hear me?
Now it's good. Yeah, okay. Now it's good. Yep.
So when we won the election, in senior positions, so you have the president, you have assistants to the president like the national advisor, and you have deputy assistants like me, and then you have everybody else. You have the schlep. When I went to work on January the 21st, Saturday after the inauguration. When we walked into the building, there were about 19 human beings who were of senior position, who had some expertise and who understood why a businessman who'd never run for public office before had been elected president, in many cases by working class Democrat voters who'd had enough and felt betrayed. It was truly an insurgency. It was like Robin Hood and his merry men, about 19 of us. Then we had to fill 4,000 positions, 4,000 presidential appointments. And we physically couldn't do it. And I'm quoting Steve Bannon, who actually said in an interview with Variety or Vogue or some garbage magazine, he actually said the following: 6 weeks into the administration, we couldn't fill. Because we were such an insurgent campaign, we didn't have the manpower. So Reince Priebus and I decided, and these are exactly the words he used in the interview, to do a drug deal with the GOP, which meant we filled 3,980 of those positions with former establishment rhinos and establishment conservatives who detested Donald Trump and saw him as an anomaly who must be undermined from the inside. Now, I can tell you all kinds of stories about how he was sabotaged by John Kelly, by members of the cabinet, because he was a businessman. He wasn't building a golf course in St. Andrews. He was running the country, and he'd never, ever been involved in politics before. I tried to do my part, but I too was sabotaged by John Kelly, a 4-star Marine general who pulled my clearances and lied about my clearances to get me out of the building. I sued him and I got my clearances back, and I still have them. But this is when I came into the building, I didn't use the phrase deep state because I thought that was tinfoil hat, Alex Jones, Watson garbage. I realized when that effort.
Well, if you, Sebastian, you still have your clearances, can you just tell us who killed JFK?
No, I can't because you don't have a clearance. but nice try.
We all know who did it. We all know who did it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Ian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I really thought the FBI was going to just delete my account right now because of the way that all happened. Really quick, I just want to ask a question to NFTZ. You are who you say you are, because there are so many people, including myself, who think you sound a lot like Sam Bankman-Fried. Is that just coincidence?
I know them personally.
I know them as well. That is 100%.
Okay, just making sure. I cannot tell you the amount of DMs I'm getting and comments saying, "Is that Sam Bankman-Fried?"
Yeah. All right, let's go back to Sebastian because he said.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Kim. Go ahead. Kim, you had another question, Kim, after the JFK question.
Yeah. So Sebastian, you said it's 3 a.m. for you, so I don't want to keep you up too long. But what I found fascinating about this entire Trump presidency is how he was derailed so many times, and people that he appointed, people that he trusted, backstabbed him and literally turned his presidency into a lame duck presidency. And since you were right there with him as an advisor, was it very frustrating for you to see that? Did you notice it from the start, and did you advise him? What did you do? What were, as an advisor, what were your concrete steps to try and protect him?
Yeah. So did I see it early on? So I had a very special position in the Strategic Initiatives Group, and it was national security related. But I wasn't a member of the National Security Council. But because my remit was related to national security, I was an observer. I was invited to every National Security Council meeting. The ones that happen in the sit room in the SCIF. And I'd go to these, and I'd sit in the back, and I'd just watch. And about 2 weeks in, I saw a pattern. And so you've got to understand, the NSC is the highest decision-making body for national security in the US government, which means you're meeting in a SCIF, you're meeting in a secure room, and you're on you're on a CIVITS, you're on secure video teleconference with every relevant part of the US government, CIA, DIA, outstations in Kabul, outstations in Pakistan, wherever. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter what the issue was, whether the meeting was on ISIS or policy against China or what have you. I saw the same thing happen again and again and again. We'd be there for an hour. We'd be there for 90 minutes. And nobody in the room, none of the bureaucrats on the secure video conference links would ever mention the president's name or what the president had said on the given issue, whatever it was. So after about 2 weeks of this, I said, okay, screw it. And I would put up my hand at the end of the meeting, the guy with the funny accent, and say, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, did you hear what the president said yesterday in Riyadh about destroying ISIS? Did you hear what the president said about China and fentanyl and changes in policies? I would have to tell them and remind them that we had had an election, because these people, SES and SISs, who've been in bureaucracy for 20, 30 years, their attitude was, I don't give a crap who the president is. Presidents come and go, and I decide the direction of the nation. So that's when I realized the deep state is real. And last point I'll make. You need
Thank
to
you for
appreciate.
acknowledging that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. Last point. Everybody, I know you've all got your favorite, pet rocks, your crypto guys, your finance guys, whatever. And I find it ironic that an immigrant to America has to remind Americans born in America what they did in 2015, because there is a connective tissue between every president, from Washington to Obama. There is a taxonomy and connection between them. Every single president is a former senator, congressman, governor, or retired general for the history of the republic. Every stinking one of them, from Washington to Obama. In 2015, the American people said, no, we don't want a politician. We don't want a retired general. We want a guy who has never run for political office in his life and is self-funded. Now, what does that mean? It means for the establishment, left and right, this is a uniparty issue, this individual who won the election, who nobody thought would win it. Remember, on the night of the election, I saved the tweet, the Huffington Post said Hillary Clinton has a 98% chance of winning and President Trump has a 1.2% chance. That was at 7 p.m. on the day of the election. When he won, they had a problem, because this individual, who'd never been involved in politics, was not owned by the unions, was not owned by Big Pharma, was not owned by Raytheon and the Beltway Bandits, and was not owned by oil. He could not be controlled. That is why he has been attacked with every arm, with secret FISA warrants against his campaign, with the Southern District of New York trying to imprison his family, because he cannot be controlled. He's an existential threat to their future. And that's why they did what they did. Why I couldn't stop it happening? Because I was fighting 4,000 people. That's why. And because General Kelly did what he did. But your question is the real question. Irrespective of politics, who runs the country? Is it the bureaucrats who are unelected? And it is the lobbyists, the Perkin Coeys? Is it the parties that run the country? Or is it the people that we elect? That's the question that I would like to discuss.
I think that is all very insightful, and thank you for sharing that. I have been very interested in the backstory of all of this, because as a bystander of that history, I always felt that Trump was never really given a chance to be president, and it was interesting to see how powerful these bureaucrats are in actually derailing him. What I would like to do, if you don't mind, this is worth a separate space with you, Sebastian, and maybe a couple of other people that you can recommend, because this is a very timely issue. It's so important now that we see these Twitter files and we understand more about how censorship actually works and is executed, to talk about how Trump himself, being a president, has basically been muted and put into a corner, like you said, ignored by the bureaucrats because they didn't really accept him as president. I mean, this is mind-blowing, right? That a leader of a country who has been elected by the people is treated like an outsider by the people that are supposed to serve him and follow his orders and his ideas. So that is something that definitely deserves a separate space. And Mario, if you could organize that, and
I've already, it's already done. It's already done.
I fly back tomorrow night, back to America. So I'll be free at the weekend or next week. So you guys just, I'm going to DM you, Mario, my cell phone, and let's just pick a time.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
By the way, where
and I do have a couple of names that I have in mind. I'm going to send them to you, Mario. And then, what would really be the cherry on top is if we can get Donald Trump to come in maybe at the end and, answer a few questions himself.
That'd be amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sebastian, one quick question before you take off. So Trump's clearly running for office. He announced. What is he going to do? What has he learned, and what is he going to do differently this time around, so all of this stuff doesn't happen again, and we don't have a repeat of the first term with Trump just fighting with bureaucrats and bureaucrats not giving him the time of day? What's different now?
I haven't had that conversation with him. I was at Mar-a-Lago 2 weeks ago, and if you guys don't know what I do now, I have a daily national radio show with 3 million listeners every single day, every week. I maintain my confidential respect for the work I did. So, I don't dish dirt and I don't write tell-all memoirs about my time in the White House. But there is one issue I will talk about publicly, and I'm going to meet the president to discuss this, because everybody should know the reality. It doesn't matter what you care about the most, whether it's the border, the economy, crypto, foreign relations, life, abortion, whatever. The only thing that matters is personnel. So Reagan was right. Policy is personnel. And we cannot make that mistake. If President Trump gets 80 million votes or 90 million votes and then is sabotaged from day one for the next 4 years, there's no point in having elections in America. So I've got a plan for how to manage personnel, how to screen people, how to have people who serve the will of the electorate. We've got 2 years to build it. And I'm prepared to help the president. But right now, I don't know what has been put in place. And the fact is, he doesn't have an adequately serious chief of staff at the moment. Because one thing the left has achieved, they came after me, they came after my wife, they came after my children. A journalist wrote 52 hit pieces on me in a month. One of them was about my 18-year-old high school son and used the word traitor in the headline. What the left have done is to make it really disincentivize any normal person from thinking that they should work for a Republican administration, especially a Trump administration.
Sebastian, the question, sorry to interrupt you there. The question that I want Donald Trump to answer is, if he runs again, which he says he will, and if he wins again, how is he going to do it differently this time? How is he going to take these lessons that he's learned?
I'll tell you one example that is very concrete. So, and this is the one thing that I will reveal because I've mentioned this publicly. Every significant department of government, which works, the executive works for the president. They don't work for the Senate. They don't work for anybody else. They work for the president. They have to be moved out of DC. If you moved the Department of Agriculture to South Dakota, if you moved the State Department to Alaska, then the bureaucrats who want to live in Adams Morgan and go to the Le Diplomat restaurant in DC, who think that they know better for America and the electorate's views do not matter, they will not move to South Dakota. They will not move to Alaska. So the power of the incestuous swamp will be limited because only people who want to serve the nation from those states will likely volunteer for those jobs. So I am in favor of dispersing federal government across America. That would be the biggest thing. And the president can do that with one document. So that would be my first recommendation in week 1.
That's how we rebuild Detroit.
And repeal Citizens United, Sebastian?
What do you talk to me about Citizens United?
So I think it was you, either you or somebody else that was mentioning where the source of the power comes from. We all know that the source of power comes from money.
Yeah, of course.
Right, and we talk about the left influencing political spheres, and there's no coincidence that the least impactful, but the most financial is LA, New York, San Francisco, and the impact that they have. Are you for or against repealing Citizens United and taking the bottle of money from corporate America out of politics in line with your attempts to decentralize the physical government as it stands?
Well, look, you can't repeal Citizens United. The president doesn't have
overturn.
The Supreme Court could overturn it. So that's not a job for a president to do. Somebody needs to take that case all the way to the Supreme Court. You're never going to get money out of politics. But again, I'm a little bit more optimistic on that than most people. Do you know how much money we spent on the presidential campaign in 2015? The Trump campaign spent $700 million. Hillary Clinton outspent us by a factor of 2 officially. It was significantly more than that in real life, but she spent 1.4 billion. So money isn't everything. If you have the right platform, the right conditions, the right level of dissatisfaction, the right vision, the right social media access, right? When you've got 93 million followers on Twitter, that actually means a thing before you're deleted by Vijaya and her buddies. So we have to do something about money. In the UK, where I was born, there's a cap. Campaigns, for example, are funded by the state, and you cannot spend more money than the campaign limit the government has set, or the parliament has set for both parties. Maybe something revolutionary of that ilk, but when it comes to Citizens United, that has to be taken all the way to the Supreme Court.
Right. No, I guess I was asking more about ideological. So I think we actually agree there, which is really interesting. And I agree with the idea of physically separating. Honestly, that's a great idea. To something I'd never think I'd say before, if Trump does get elected, I kind of love the idea that he can't do another term, and that I think that a lot of his agendas or how he would have operated as president would have been a lot different if he wasn't also aiming for another presidency. And I won't get into
this is crucial. This is crucial. Okay, so I'm caught in the middle because of all the Ron DeSantis bullshit. The libertarian billionaires who are lining up behind Ron and whispering in his ear, saying, "You're the guy. You're the guy." All the people who supported Trump and now hate him. This isn't about the man. This is about mechanics. Let's be very clear here. The next president has to take a flamethrower to Washington, D.C.
That was exactly Trump's plan. He said he's going to drain the swamp, right?
Yeah, but let me finish. Any politician other than Trump would want to be reelected, including Ron DeSantis. They want 2 terms. President Trump can't constitutionally be reelected, and that's why he has nothing to lose. And this is why, and I know it's an uphill battle, and all those people are mostly still there, but the only person who could truly take a flamethrower to the corruption, to move the agencies, is a man who cannot serve a second term. And that is one more reason why Trump is the right person for the job,
and cannot be immune for another 4 years of actions taken while in office. Very interestingly.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about Trump saying he was in favor of terminating parts of the Constitution?
No, that's been misread.
That's not what he said.
You want me to read exactly what he said?
No.
Let me read exactly.
You can read it, but I'll tell you what he meant. I'll tell you what he meant. As a guy who actually worked for him in the Oval Office, what he meant is that the Constitution has been shredded, not by him, but by those who have used the FBI as a political weapon, that have used the DOJ to target parents at school board meetings, that have used FISA warrants against innocent people, that have used a Russian agent for a Steele dossier to acquire surveillance warrants. The Truth Social post is that the Constitution has already been shredded. That's what he meant.
Yeah, but I mean, this is exactly what he said. He said a massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections. It sounds there that he is condoning the termination of parts of the Constitution in
No,
order
he's
to
saying what
overturn the election.
happened that's exactly what
Yes.
happened. Not condoning, that is what already happened.
So this goes to the whole, what did they call him for 4 years? They called him a Nazi, a fascist, and a dictator. Now, if that was what he meant in that statement, if he was a fascist and a dictator, then why didn't he deploy the 82nd Airborne to Congress? Why did he not allow the tanks to roll? I know this man. This is an individual whose daughter is converted to Orthodox Judaism, whose grandchildren are Jewish. He's the one who's called an anti-Semite and a bigot. He's married to an immigrant. This man loves America. You don't have to believe me, but I'm the guy who worked for him. This man has decided to put himself through that hell again. I don't know if I could do that. My father was tortured by secret police officers. Till the day he died, he had scars on his wrists from where they tied him together and hung him from the ceiling of the torture chamber. With that family background, I'm not sure I could have done what he did 3 weeks ago at Mar-a-Lago to say, you know what, I'm going to do it again. So the idea that he's some kind of dictator who's shredding up the Constitution, it's bogus, it's garbage. He is saying that that is what has happened, and our founding fathers would never have believed it would have happened. That's what that night. It was not well, phrased, but that's, I guarantee you, what he meant. And if it were the obverse, then he would still be in office right now, and there would actually be, FEMA camps of Democrats. But there aren't. There are 100 people in solitary, 3 miles from Congress, January 6th, detainees who haven't even been arraigned in 2 years. We have a right as Americans to swift justice. For 2 years, people kept in solitary before they are even arraigned before a judge. That's the reality of America. There aren't Democrats in solitary for 2 years. There's only Republicans. So let's have a little clarity about what he did for 4 years and what the Democrats did to him and to his supporters.
Hey, Sebastian, just because I don't think I get to ask this question any other time, since you do get to hang out with him like as a human, can you, and I don't think anybody actually knows the answer to the question, outside of everything we see, which is a lot of presentation, what is he actually like as a human? How would you define him as a human?
That's so funny. That is so funny. Wherever I go, it doesn't matter what I'm lecturing on, whether it's jihadi ideology or Democrat or Republican politics. Sooner or later, that is the only question people ask me. What's he like?
I'm a crazy liberal, but I'm still interested in
yeah, no, of course.
Who he is.
It's the human question. It's the human question. I'm going to disappoint you, because if you've been alive for the last 20 years, if you've turned on a television and turned on The Apprentice, if you've read a newspaper, you know exactly what President Trump is like. Look, I grew up in England. I went to a private school for 14 years. I went to the debate club. I spoke Latin, okay? So can you imagine what it was like for me to work for this guy, okay, from Queens? That was a very, very big culture shock for me. This is not exactly my cup of tea. But behind closed doors, he is exactly the same as he is in front of 60,000 people in a soccer stadium, in a football stadium. He's exactly the same as he is on TV, on a debate stage, talking about little Marco and Sleepy Joe. He is utterly authentic. Whether you like him or not, he's utterly authentic. He's not the Janus-faced, two-faced bastards of DC on both the Republican and Democrat side. And what's he really like? I'll tell you one story, and then I'm going to jump, but I'm still going to DM you, Mario, my cell phone, and we'll just pick some time to have a longer discussion. So I'm in the Middle East right now, and I gave a speech early today about.
Where in the Middle East, by the way, Sebastian? I'm in Dubai at the moment.
I'm in Israel with 350
Oh,
of my
okay.
listeners.
Okay.
We've got all our listeners here on a little kind of cruise.
Where in Israel are you?
I'm in Jerusalem. We were in Jerusalem all day. So,
I'm not trying to dox you. Where in Jerusalem are you?
What?
I'm not trying to dox you. I'm just wondering, where in Jerusalem are you?
I'm not going to reveal my location with my wife in Jerusalem.
I lived there for a year. I'm just interested in what your view was. That's it.
I'll let you continue to ask you the question, Sebastian.
As a
about
guy
how
who
Trump is.
Yeah, as a guy who's appeared in an ISIS video, I'm not going to tell you where I am in Jerusalem.
You've appeared in an ISIS video.
Yes, he has.
Yes, I have. They put clips of me. Zawahiri made a video with clips of me on Fox News. It's not very nice.
Yep.
Anyway.
I've seen it.
So to explain to these hundreds of people here because everybody wants to know what he's really like. And we're in Jerusalem, and I told a story. Clinton, 23 years ago, promised to recognize Jerusalem and move the embassy. He broke that promise. So did George Bush. So did Obama. For 23 years, every 6 months, the incumbent president had to tell Jerusalem, sorry, we may have passed legislation to recognize Jerusalem and move the embassy, but we're not going to do it right now because reasons. President Trump called a meeting of the NSC at principals level, which is unusual. Principals means, not directors of directorates in the NSC, it means the cabinet. And he brought the cabinet members to the skiff, to the Situation Room, and he said, gentlemen, lady, we are moving the embassy. I'm recognizing Jerusalem. Only 3 members, and I'm not going to tell you who didn't, only 3 members of his cabinet supported his decision. And legends of the Marine Corps, like Mad Dog Mattis, the warrior monk, were such cuckolded cowards that in front of their colleagues and in front of his commander-in-chief said, Mr. President, you can't do that. You will ignite World War III, and I don't have enough Marines to guard our embassies. What was my boss's response? And this will give you an idea of how much of an anti-Semite and corrupt bigot he is. He said, I am doing this for 3 reasons. Number 1, during the campaign, I promised the American people that we would finally keep our promise to our ally. Number 2, I'm doing this because I promised the Israelis that we would do this after 23 years of broken promises. And then lastly, in front of all of them, shaming all of them except the 3 who agreed with him, he said, I am doing this because this is the right thing to do. That's who Donald Trump is, and that's the man who they will tell you is a racist, a bigot, and a corrupt politician.
Sebastian, I've actually, I actually really, and I'm surprised by a lot of what you said. And I've got a lot more questions that I'll save for your next appearance. So I'll
write them down.
Yeah, I will, and I'll prep them.
We're going to have a ton of questions for you.
Yeah, and I'll get the audience. I did a tweet for the audience as well, so everyone, there's a tweet there. I'll pin it above in a bit. We can all ask your questions. We'll choose a few of them and ask them in a special segment with Sebastian. But I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you staying.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
just really quick for Sebastian.
That's just a second, everyone. Let's wrap this up because Sebastian has been very kind with his time, and he said it's 3 a.m.
Yeah, let me ask him a question, Kim.
So
really
hey,
quick.
Tara, why don't
let me ask him a question, Sebastian? I'm just curious, really quick. Do you foresee Donald Trump having the ability to win?
Oh, absolutely, but only if local patriot citizens fix the election process, because the GOP won't do it. The midterm elections weren't a referendum on Donald Trump. That's absolute bullshit. Fetterman, electing Fetterman is not because of Donald Trump. Electing brain dead people like Fetterman is because Pennsylvania had 50 days of election, and half of the people in Pennsylvania voted before even the first debate with Oz. So in those states where we can't fix it to have election days, the GOP locally, because RNC won't do it, Rona McDaniel won't do it. I am so excited that this warrior lawyer, Harmy Dillon, has announced that she's going to challenge Rona McDaniel. She's amazing. If locally, if we can't fix it so that we have an election day in America with voter ID, I'm really, it pisses me off to say this as a conservative. We have to get more organized than the Democrats are. We have to go to the old people's homes. We have to, collect ballots.
We're going to start using mail-in ballots. Use their
Yeah,
strategy.
nothing illegal.
Right?
Nothing
Or blockchain.
Nothing
Blockchain
illegal.
would be the way to cut out any chance of cheating.
Yeah, we can't initiate blockchain in 2 years, but we just have to get a better ground game. If we have a fair election, I mean, one last thing. Think of this data. This is a data set. This is just an empirical data set. President Trump got 64 million votes in 2015. 4 years later, he got 73 million. That's after 4 years of being called a Russian asset, a racist, a bigot, an Islamophobe, and a Nazi, and a white supremacist. He got 9.5 million more votes after 4 years of that. And he increased his share of the history. He got more Hispanic and black votes than any Republican since 1963. So absolutely. And by the way, he got more votes than any other incumbent president in history. So when conservatives say, he's toast, he's done, you're talking about the man who received more votes than any other incumbent president in US history. They have to say that because he is still not a politician. He is still not a politician and nobody owns him. And that's why he can win, but he can only win if we have fair and free elections. And in those states where we can't make it election day, we've just got to outgame the Democrats and out-organize them. And it's a tall order. It's a very tall order. But I tell you what, I was at Mar-a-Lago for the election. I was there with the president watching the returns. What was my wife doing? I was eating, coconut shrimp in Mar-a-Lago with the president. My wife that day for the midterms left our house at 3:30 a.m. I saw her come home because of the security cameras that are connected to my phone. I was in Mar-a-Lago having a good time. My wife comes home at 9:45 in the evening. 3:30 in the morning to 9:45. She wasn't eating cocktail shrimp. What was she doing? She was the senior election officer for our district. And my wife hates politics. She detests it like the plague. If my wife thinks it is important, I can guarantee you nobody cheated in her district. If my wife, who hates politics, can make sure we have a clean election in our part of Virginia, guess what? Everybody has a role to play. And it should be irrespective of your political color. If you think elections should result in the people being represented by the person that they choose, then you have a role to play. And it can be done. It will be hard, but he can win. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Thank you so much, Seb. And I think that's where this sort of goes full circle, right back to that comment that was made about what Trump said about the Constitution and being taken so far out of context. It's exactly what Seb just mentioned. If the elections aren't free and fair, then what are we even doing here?
Thank you, Sebastian. I'd wait for your DM, man, and we can organize a space.
I'm doing it now.
To question you. I appreciate it, man.
I'm
Thank you so
very
much,
much
Sebastian.
looking forward to that, Sebastian, and thank you for your time, guys. I will also take off. So
hang on. I have to thank you to Warrior. Warrior, you know who you are because he's the guy who told me about your first spaces last week, and he's the reason I'm on this one. So God bless you, Warrior. Thank you.
Thank you, Warrior. We owe you one.
Hey, Sebastian, I know we disagree on a lot. I just want to say you are a good debater, though.
Very well spoken.
It was
as well.
a debate club. Debate club in school, guys.
So Sebastian, appreciate it. I'll wait for your DM, and you're welcome anytime. So we'll be good to get the space organized. Thanks a lot, man. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Ian, I'll let you do just a quick refresh of the room, and I know a lot of people are waiting for the next drop, the next file drop.
I don't think it's going to be tonight, but yeah, I'll give a refresh.
Yeah, just a quick refresh of the room. And if it doesn't happen tonight, everyone's what you need to do right now. So it's perfect timing. I'm going to pin it above, and it's retweeted on my account for the next space to set your reminders. So when the next drop happens, I've just got the space. Let me retweet it again and pin it above. So you have to go to that link and then click on set reminders, and then you'll get a reminder set for when we do the next space, for when the next drop happens. So we did this one. I was literally, Ian, I was I was butt naked about to go to sleep, and then someone messaged me like, "Did you see this?" Like literally seconds after the drop.
And I called you.
Damn it! Yeah, was it
Now we
yourself?
know
Was it
how
you?
Mario sleeps.
Yeah. So immediately I'm like, all right, perfect. I wake up the team, and by the way, this is streaming on YouTube as well, Ian. So
nice.
a lot of we've got a bunch of people watching on YouTube, which we never did before. So it's
Very
going
nice.
well, and they've got a good chat going. But yeah, I'll let you refresh the room. It's been a really good debate, and I think we've had a few cool guests come on stage. What we've seen. So again, for the refresh, what was the drop today? What was the news today? But more importantly, just a very brief overview of the drop that we saw last time when you did the first space.
Friday,
if you summarize that, that'll be great. Yeah.
All right. So last Friday, as we all know, they dropped, Matt Taibbi dropped the first instance of the Twitter files, and it contained a lot of information about how Twitter had colluded with the campaign for Joe Biden to suppress certain tweets, right? And later on, it turned out that they had made the unilateral decision to suppress the New York Post's coverage of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which, as we all know, is totally 100% real. It's not a bunch of nonsense, right? That is basically what happened last week. And so everybody's been wondering, why is it that the second drop hasn't happened yet, right? And Elon Musk did promise, well, he didn't promise, but he said that it would come the next day, and then nothing happened. And then, 2-3 days later, and it's still not here. And so today we find out that a certain man, an individual named Jim Baker or James Baker, who used to be this huge FBI guy, to put it mildly, who was responsible for the Steele dossier investigation and so on, he had, been terminated at the FBI and went to work for Twitter. Okay, so he got fired today for basically suppressing the release of the Twitter files, and Elon Musk had no idea this man was, the one vetting all of the information, all of the files that were being sent to Matt Taibbi and to Barry Weiss, who are the two journalists who are covering this, the files. He had no idea this man was suppressing these things, right? He had no idea this man was still working at Twitter, so he let him go. He was exited, so to speak. And so Matt Taibbi put out a Twitter thread today, basically clarifying what happened. So he said, thread, Twitter files supplemental. On Friday, the first installment of Twitter Files is published here. We expected to publish more over the weekend. Many wondered why there was a delay. We can now tell you that part of the reason why. On Tuesday, that's today, Twitter Deputy General Counsel and former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker was fired. Among the reasons, vetting the first batch of Twitter files without acknowledgement of new management. Now, who's new management? That's Elon Musk. He is the new management at Twitter. And he was vetting these files, working ostensibly as a lawyer, as a general counsel for Twitter, to disseminate the information over to Matt Taibbi and to whoever else, right? Barry Weiss being the other person of these files, and he was suppressing it. The process for, and I'm continuing what he said here, the process of producing the Twitter files involved the delivery to two journalists, Barry Weiss and me being Matt Taibbi, via a lawyer close to the new management, meaning Elon Musk. So basically, he worked at Twitter, and then he sent it to another lawyer. And he was acting as a gatekeeper, essentially, just Jim Baker. However, after the initial batch, things became complicated. Over the weekend, while we were both dealt with obstacles to new searches, so it was very hard for them to dig through the files, it was Barry Weiss who discovered that the person in charge of releasing the files was somebody named Jim. When asked who Jim's last name was, the answer came back, Jim Baker. My jaw hit the floor, says Weiss. The first batch of files both reporters received was marked Spectra Baker emails. And it's very crucial. Baker is a controversial figure. He has been something of a zealot of FBI controversies dating back to 2016, from the Steele dossier to the Alpha Bank server mess. He resigned in 2018 after an investigation into leaks to the press. The news that Baker was reviewing the Twitter files surprised everyone involved, to say the least. New Twitter chief Elon Musk acted quickly to exit Baker on Tuesday. Reporters resumed searches through the Twitter files material, a lot of it today. So it only started today. They only got back into the files today. The next installment of the Twitter files will appear on Barry Weiss's timeline. Stay tuned. So that's where we are at so far, and the reason why we haven't seen any files since then was because they had very limited access to the files, and it was being suppressed by Jim Baker, who was, as Seb Gorka quite succinctly pointed out to all of us, was a guy at the FBI. He's basically a deep state guy. Right now, you can listen back to what he said, and the term is, I know, a bit conspiratorial, but it's conspiracy fact. Right? These guys are essentially the government, the de facto government, and that is what they do. They think they run the place.
And when you say deep state, what do you mean by that term?
When I say deep state, I'm not referring to some Illuminati government. I'm talking about bureaucrats, essentially people who have been in the FBI or any of the other three-letter agencies for the past 20, 25, 30 years, appointees of some previous administration who've never left. They basically think they know better than any elected official, right? Any elected president, whether it is going to be Trump or DeSantis or anybody else. They think that they run the place. They run the show. They know better than anybody else. That's the deep state. And they will do anything in their power to undermine any existing administration if it means, getting their way. And that's exactly what happened, as Seb Gorka he explained quite well. That's what happened to the Trump administration, is that they couldn't fill in these positions. About 3,000 to 4,000 people. These positions could not be filled, so they had to appoint these people that were provided to them by the GOP, and the GOP obviously being establishment, got all these people back in, and these people had no intention of working under Trump or working for him, so they worked against him. That is what I refer to by the deep state.
I think it's important when you say deep state and refer to Baker here. I think it's important to note that we don't know the facts yet.
Of course,
we just know that we just know that he was fired by Elon for obviously interfering in some way in the release of these documents, which I don't agree with. But to just come out and say that.
Well, we don't know if it was
a question I actually just received. A question I just received in the chat was regarding what you're talking about right now, and they asked, "Is there a chance?" And I want to know from Ian, do you think that there's a chance that Baker effectively deleted or modified access to those Twitter files that were supposed to be released by now?
I don't believe so. I don't believe he has the ability to do that. I just think that he has the ability to just, to determine what gets sent out. So effectively just acts as a gatekeeper. I wouldn't be too worried about him being able to delete the files. He'd be able to undo that pretty easily.
So before, I've got a question on this, but before that, Brian, as a liberal, and I think Fidgetal, you're still there, guys, what are your honest, I think, I don't, for me, objectively speaking, I think the discussion with Sebastian was, before I give my opinion, I enjoyed it, man. Like, whatever my take is politically, I enjoyed it. I'd love I know you disagree with some things, but what was your takeaway from that discussion? And that goes to Brian and Fidgetal.
Can I, really quick, Mario, before you go to them, can I just quickly say, even though Kim had to leave, that none of that would have even happened without Kim.com. And I just want to say massive shout out to him for guiding that conversation and those questions and, making that happen. And then Sebastian for being here and opening up and discussing it freely with us. I mean, that was a moment in history, and so many people are thanking me because they heard a side of things that they've never heard before. So
not only this, Tara, and not only this, he just jumped in at 4 in the morning, and now it's 3:47 in the morning in Israel. And that is a beautiful thing about the space. It's like, this is not a pre-prepped interview. He's not ready sitting in a suit. He's sitting at home comfortably at 3 in the morning and decided to jump in just to share his perspective on things and his story. So it just makes it a lot more personal than any other scripted interview you see on TV or most other channels, which I really enjoy. It just makes it very, very personal. It just makes you feel like you're sitting on a table with him and he's telling you a story at 2, 3 in the morning before heading to bed. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really quick, I just am reading something that says breaking new documents have uncovered a secret Twitter backdoor U.S. government officials used to censor information about COVID vaccines and most definitely the 2020 elections.
It's not exactly news. It's not breaking.
I was wondering, is this new or is this the same old?
News. It is something that has been revealed in the lawsuit that's currently ongoing between, I believe, Missouri. Eric Schmidt is suing the Biden administration, and essentially the DHS and all these other organizations have the ability to contact Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to get things removed. It's basically a form, an online form that they can just fill in and get things taken down. That is something that I think Elon Musk needs to look into because, I mean, on the one hand, it does make sense to have that. You need to have a direct line to social media if, for instance, a terrorist is planning an attack and you need to take it down if they're organizing on any given social media platform. I think that's necessary. But on the other hand, it has been, as we've seen here, used to suppress information that would be of the public's interest to know about. And so this is something very, I think, that will be revealed in some upcoming set of Twitter files, because Biz Stone, the former CEO of Twitter, he took over after Jack briefly. He said that there are many, many stories that they suppressed, and they're quite happy about suppressing these stories. So that's something Elon's going to have to look into. It's something that Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss and whoever else finally has access to the files is going to have to cover. I'm very curious as to what stories they suppressed.
I got to say, one of the most profound moments of what Sebastian had to say tonight, which really impressed upon me. The swamp is so deep and the corruption is so thick.
If you're speaking, I cannot hear you.
No, we can. Everyone can hear him. Ian, you can't hear him. It's a bit of a glitch. But yes, Stephen, everyone else can hear you. So
okay,
Ian's lost.
Yeah, I think Sebastian made one of the strongest arguments for Trump that for 2024 that I didn't even really consider, in terms of the corruption's so deep and the swamp's so deep, the corruption's so thick that it's going to take somebody that's not up for re-election, that isn't even seeking re-election, and somebody that we already know is kind of a rogue maverick to come in there with hammer swinging to do it. I don't really think I can't think of anybody else that I would trust to really take on those things with the tenacity that it would take than somebody that's really not up or not seeking re-election, honestly.
Before I get another speaker to speak, just reminding everyone, we're winding down the space, getting a final few speakers to give us their thoughts. We'll be back live for the next drop in, I don't know when, depending when the next drop is, but make sure you set your reminders. So it's pinned above. I've retweeted on my account. Cannot remind you enough. You don't want to miss the next live session. Make sure you set reminders. There's already a few thousand. Oh shit. Okay. Or almost 5,000 already registered. So that's good. Make sure you register.
Nice.
Set your reminders there if you haven't already. It's retweeted on my account and it's pinned above, so we can see you whenever the next drop happens. I'll give the mic to Harrison. Go ahead, man.
Oh, I just wanted to respond, but I'll wait.
So, kind of a simple journalistic question that if anybody has contact with Elon or Barry or Matt Taibbi, why did they do the release at 6 p.m. on a Friday when nobody's paying attention to the news? Because that's the time where news goes to die. I'm hoping the second drop won't be this Friday because nobody will be paying attention again. This last time we saw a drop, the next day Trump tweets something that completely something that completely distracts from the whole message of the actual Twitter files. And then by when Monday comes and everybody turns on the news again, everybody's talking about what Trump said rather than what actually happened in the substance of the news drop on Friday. Why is Elon choosing to release it on a Friday evening?
I can answer that. I don't think it's deliberate, but I think it's, in a way, it sort of ignores the news cycle. Because what are people talking about on Twitter all day, right? It's not necessarily stuff that's been in the mainstream media. What people are talking about on Twitter, most people, right, what's on the back of their minds are the Twitter files. It doesn't really matter what the media says anymore. I think that the media in general is becoming obsolete. It really is, right? The online media is not going to be obsolete anytime soon. However, the mainstream media, what's on TV and cable news and so on, that is most certainly becoming obsolete, and they know it. And so I don't think we really need to worry about that 24-hour news cycle anymore, the weekend news cycle. I don't think that is as serious a concern as it once was. I think the impact of the Twitter files, you could release it at 4 a.m. in the morning and people will read it in the morning and care about it. So I'm not super concerned. You say, yeah, the media isn't covering it, but they're choosing not to cover it, and they're going to use any number of excuses they want to not cover it. As we've seen now, they're calling it a nothing burger.
For how much of
Wikipedia is trying to censor it. But I'm not super concerned about that because I think the future, and maybe I'm being really bullish about this, right? But I think that Twitter represents the future of journalism, and we won't be worried about these news cycles as much as we used to be anymore. I think that in the future, news will be coming out as is without any worries or concerns about what people are talking about at any other time. It won't be news stations dictating what what gets talked about. God, I need some water. Yeah, what gets talked about at all? I think that people are going to talk about what they want to talk about, and Twitter is the perfect medium for it. So it's just a matter of time before.
And I want to add one more thing to Ian. I always go through the audience. I'm seeing a lot of journalists. I want to applaud the journalists that have the balls to share something that's worth sharing, despite it being on Twitter. Even if you see Twitter as a competitor, I think you're doing the right thing there. Not from a, also from a business perspective as well. Because I just think if you keep ignoring platforms like this, it's just another reason for people to stop listening to you. So I just want to applaud, and I'm looking at the journalists in the audience, and some of them do share, a lot of things that are said here. And I'll applaud you guys. And for those that are ignoring it, ignore it at your own peril. Tara, any final words? I'll let Fidgetal actually go, and then Tara, you have the final word for the space. Fidgetal, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if it wasn't apparent, I'm obviously not a Trump fan, but that doesn't change the ability to have a conversation just about anything, right? And I think that it's really, really important, especially in a Twitter space or in a more decentralized or free space, to think more about listening rather than talking. Right? My mother always told me that one of the most valuable things you can do, because 95% of the time I know what somebody's going to say before they finish the first 3 words of their sentence. But there's power in letting other people talk. It also teaches you to listen. What I took away from the most interesting things from the Gorka exchange, the same thing that Stephen did, which is I always believed that money corrupts, power corrupts absolutely, right? And that is no more prevalent than in politics, right? Regardless of, and those 2 questions were connected. I was asking who Trump was because I wanted to see who he might be without money driving his political decisions. And then the idea of him not having to be driven for another term. I think those both highlighted one of my most important things that I was trying to discuss in this space that I think could take an entire space in and of itself, which is, I earlier mentioned that that Twitter most likely did most of its decisions based on its fiduciary duty to its public shareholders, right? The argument to the opposite, that decisions weren't made for money, is literally saying that he could have been sued by every shareholder for breaching fiduciary duty, when there's an agreement that most of the listeners lean left, and apparently all of the people who most of the people who work there leaned left as well. Right? That's not coincidental. It's not coincidental that a general who leaned left, an FBI attorney who leaned left, went to Twitter. The inference that means that the government sent him, or he was working for the government, versus the facts that he was likely left-leaning and worked for a left-leaning company, all leads towards the idea that these decisions were most likely made for the benefit of the company and to maximize money. And I just think that's really, really important to remember. To not just leap to assumptions and gaps in knowledge and take.
Well, I disagree with you.
That's okay though.
Yeah, I know. That's the beauty of the space, right?
Mario, you gotta let me loose, man. You gotta let me loose.
Who's this, bro? Easy, bro. Easy, man. Bro, I'm a nice guy, but man, Ian and Tara would be ruthless. Yeah, well, they'll kick you out.
Yeah,
That's just I'm the only one.
I just talk over him,
Yeah. And then Tara will mute everyone.
He's popular in the NFT space. I'd love to hear what he has to say on substantive topics.
But,
I don't
bro,
think they did it for money, because they actually lost money doing all of this. That's just fact.
Yeah, Ian, you're the only one. You've got a brain on you. To say this is all for money.
Excuse me. Okay, he's out. I'm just kidding.
Unreal. It's because this is the reality, guys. We all know.
Yeah.
We all know that this is.
My space is bugged. We need to end the space.
Oh, okay. Ian. Fud, yeah. So Fud is actually
closing thoughts if that's okay.
Yeah,
Mario.
of course. Let me tell Fud before you do. Just Fud, the reason that you're muted, not because you're speaking badly, just Ian couldn't hear you. It's actually glitching. But I'll bring you up in the next space, man. You can give us your thoughts, because space starts to glitch after a few hours. Not making this up. He couldn't hear other speakers earlier. I'll say one thing, and then Tara, of course, as always, you'll end it. I just want to say for everyone, like, the purpose for doing this, I'll always remind everybody, is that I've always said this: media is biased. Again, I'm generalizing, but to make a point, media is biased for various reasons: advertisers, political stance, etc. Social media is full of echo chambers, and this is the problem we're trying to solve. You can see on stage people disagreeing, people from both sides of every debate that we have, and we have no incentive to be biased in any way. So that's the goal of doing this, and I think we've done a pretty good job so far, and appreciate you all for being part of it. Tara, I'll give you the final word. And by the way, before Tara speaks, just remember, everyone, set your reminders. It's on my profile, it's pinned above. So before Tara ends the space, make sure you set your reminders. I'll give Tara the final word. And of course, Ian, Kim, and every other panelist, thank you so much. Tara, the mic is all yours.
I just really ultimately want to commend everyone who came up here, behaved like an adult, and, spoke freely, openly, with different opinions, without, turning into personal attacks or anything along those lines, and just how much I appreciate this conversation and hearing from people from both sides of the aisle. And I think, I know that so many in the audience do as well, because they've DM'd me, they've told me, and I understand the people who complain and don't want to hear the other side, I guess you could say. But at the same time, this is exactly what we're all fighting for, is the freedom to speak, and to speak openly, without being shut down, without being censored, without being suppressed. So that applies to everybody, whether you agree with their opinion or not. And so I just want to commend Mario on ensuring that happens, on, attempting to make this stage as fair as possible and well-rounded as possible. And I would argue that you've done a better job than any mainstream media network in doing so. So thank you, Mario. If you guys are not following Mario, make sure you're following Mario. Also, go to his profile, click the bell icon, and make sure you have notifications turned on. That way you know immediately when his pieces start or when he tweets, and you get alerted. So, and also just for everyone up here who spoke and came up and braved, I think at one point there were close to 15,000 people in here at a time. So everyone who spoke, who you agree with, or want to hear more from them, make sure you shoot them a follow. If later you decide you don't want to be following them, you can always change that. But I think it's just a nice gesture to show people that you appreciate them coming up and sharing their voices. Again, thank you, Mario. Ian, Kim's not here anymore, Sebastian, and all of the speakers who came up and spoke and added to the conversation. That was, I feel like it was another historical space, and I've learned so much here just in such a little